Good to go, Terry? Call the meeting to order, Tuesday, January 6, 2023, regular board meeting, San Ynez Valley Union High School District Board of Education. Roll call, please, Terry.
All members are present.
Thank you. Stand for the flag salute, please. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So before we move on to the approval of the agenda, it was suggested to move the principal's update to number 1 on the superintendent's reports. Everybody okay with that? Okay. So I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the move of principal's update to number 1.
I second that.
Roll call, Terry. Please.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Ibarra. Ms. Grace Velasquez.
Aye.
Ms. Noble.
Aye.
Ms. Shehab.
Aye.
Motion passes.
For later.
Check, check. So we'll move on to the superintendent's reports and presentations.
Yeah, I'd like to invite Principal Niehoff up to the podium to present his report.
All right, good evening. This is going to be, they're always fun, and I know last month we had students here, and that's about as good as it gets, but this is the second about as good as it gets, because we're doing just some recognition and thank yous this evening. I would actually probably have hundreds of people, literally, that I would love to recognize and thank all the help that I got this year. I want to thank the board, had a lot of help from our staff and community, and had a lot of help from students. But tonight, do want to recognize a few key people. First of all, you may remember that our student board rep, and those of us that were at graduation know that Zoe recently underwent heart transplant surgery. I haven't got an update in the last couple of days, but before and right about graduation time, her family reached out to us several times and were appreciative that we were certainly including her and acknowledging her in graduation, but even more importantly, just giving us an update that Zoe is doing very well, recovering quickly. She's down at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles, and the doctors are really excited and positive about her recovery and her status. And so obviously we know Zoe couldn't be here this evening. Zoe has been our board rep this year, done an outstanding job, president of the Environmental Club, member of ASB, and a whole host of other things. So we wish Zoe well, and if I hear updates from Zoe's family, I will share them with the board and the district. Okay, next, last month we did actually announce this publicly because it became public shortly before our last board meeting. But since then, we've been fortunate enough to have more time to kind of celebrate, acknowledge, and reflect. And we've had a lot of local media interest and a lot of other interests. And we want to do a little bit more of a formal recognition than we did last time. And it's my pleasure to have that San Ynez Valley Union High School has the 2024 Santa Barbara County Teacher of the Year. We'd like to recognize Mr. Greg Wolf. I would like to say we did nominate Greg, and that was not an accident. Greg has been in the 9 years here, I think his 10th year teaching. Greg has been someone that students and staff have recognized that he consistently for being an outstanding teacher. But one of the things I wanted to share with everybody was that Greg really had an exceptional year of really embracing project-based and deeper learning. He's very, very passionate about student voice, gets all of his students engaged, and he really is the kind of the model of where I think the future of education is going. Somebody who connects with all students, gets all students engaged, and gives all students opportunities to do real relevant work and things that they're interested in. So we're very fortunate, and I think he's going to represent not only the school and the district well, but the entire county. So thank you, Greg. He does actually have duties. It's kind of one of these recognitions, honors that comes with a job. In addition to having to fill out like a 20-page application that he did to ultimately be recognized. But the county committee that came was very impressed, and they agreed with kind of the assessment that we made. But Greg will represent the county the next year. He'll be at county board meetings. He'll be collaborating and communicating with schools across the county. Sharing best practices and kind of especially some of the things that he has been involved in that have not only landed him as the county teacher of the year, but that the county was impressed with in terms of what they think the future of learning looks like. So you're going to hear and see a lot more of Greg next year countywide. Want to recognize, I don't believe I know one was already leaving across the country. Just want to acknowledge that I know we had graduation Thursday night, but following graduation, we had the annual Safe and Sober Grad Party. That has always been a parent-run event, and that was no exception this year. I just wanted to acknowledge the two parents. They're not here tonight, but that led that effort, and they had nearly 50 parent volunteers working for weeks, and they have been working on this all year, and that's Heather Sarloos and Val Allen. They, through donations, sponsorships, grants, and partnerships, they were able to host a $60,000 party for our seniors, which included, I've never seen a high school event like this in terms of all the food that was available, all the rides, all the activities, all the refreshments, dancing, music. It literally took up a large part of the campus following graduation. But probably the most impressive part was the number of volunteers they had working weeks ahead of time, several weekends, including the weekend afterwards doing cleanup. And so just we're really fortunate that we have parents in our community that not only realize this is important, but are able to rally lots of parent support. So definitely wish next year's, the class of 2024 that they can keep that tradition going. We do have another person I'd like to recognize, and she is here this evening, and that is Pat Merritt from our local Elks. Pat, we're going to invite you up. I just want to tell you that I only met Pat this year. Pat essentially came to my office one day, introduced herself, and what Pat presented us was several opportunities. One was we already in our counseling office had a student of the month that is primarily based on academic performance. And what Pat brought to us was an opportunity to recognize another student of the month each month, but really focusing on character, service, and leadership. And with the Elks providing them with a $100 award or scholarship. So Pat, every month I would get the calls and emails from Pat, hey, who's our next student, and why are we selecting them? So, and it was really exciting. We had a great group of students that got to be recognized this year. But in addition to that, Pat and the Elks stepped up each time we needed them. So for example, during the Every 15 Minutes program this year, Pat and the Elks fed the entire crew that was the students, staff, and community that were responsible for putting on the Every 15 Minutes event. They hosted them for the final lunch after the assembly. A couple weeks later, we have teacher and staff appreciation. And what do? Reach out to Pat and the Elks again. And to be honest with you, they came through again, of course, and fed our entire staff lunch. And just so you know, the Elks actually had some prior commitments that week. They had a state level conference. Pat and her daughter did it all by themselves at home. So we're just really lucky to have people like this. Thank you, Pat. Yeah, this community has got tons of great people. I know you guys know that, and it's fun to feature them. And they do all of this obviously out of the goodness of their heart, not for the recognition. So, final thank you is those of you that were at graduation on Thursday night. this was probably a little new element to graduation because we added some new elements this year. We did reach out to our community and ask for some sponsors because we had some additional expenses for graduation this year. And once again, the community came through. These folks were acknowledged in the program at graduation as well as on the slideshow that preceded the graduation. But I just wanted to recognize them tonight. They're not here in attendance necessarily. And you can see all the companies that were involved. But these are all local businesses. Some of them are parents as well. Some of them are former parents. Some of them are future parents, right? And these are folks that just graciously volunteered to, in addition to probably helping with other events, including Sober Grad, said, hey, we want to be one of the official graduation sponsors for the class of 2023. So once again, thank you guys. Okay, just some wrap up here for the year. You may remember this board probably didn't see this as a board, but you may have maybe heard about in the fall. We did a presentation with some early data, some student survey data with just a very simple 5-question survey. We decided to repeat that same survey question this spring. We focused in on our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders for this aspect of it. And we just asked them 5 questions. The first one is, how much did you enjoy school this year? And you can see we had 40% said very much, a little over 50% said somewhat, and then we had a small group, 6.3% of students that said they weren't enjoying school at all. When we have these type of surveys, one of the things we do in addition to gathering the data is to try to follow up with students. So we have several people, Claudia Pena, our health and wellness coordinator, our counselors, and others when appropriate, follow up with students so that the students may or may not know that when they are taking the survey, it does collect their emails. And so it's not anonymous. We want to know if there's something that, the school can do to improve their experience. And I know people in this room have talked about how important that is. So, this seems, in some ways you could say that's a low percentage of students that are enjoying school, but you'll also have a lot of us in the room that would say, anybody not enjoying school is not a good thing, right? Because if you're not enjoying school, chances are you're probably not learning or performing. And chances are it's not delivering you to where you need to go for whatever reason. So it's an opportunity to connect with students, find out, are there barriers? Is there something going on personally that's preventing them from connecting or enjoying school? Is there something happening at school that is preventing them from having a better experience? So these are important things to do. The next question we asked is, how challenging were your classes this year? And again, about a fifth of the students described their classes as very challenging. Then we had a large group of students that say somewhat challenging, and then a very, again, small percent, less than 4%, are saying their courses are not challenging at all. So again, you could say, statistically, it's not large, right? Or some may even argue not significant, but the reality is, there is a sweet spot, right? You don't want courses to be so challenging that students are having anxiety, having too much stress, leading to, health and wellness issues. And yet, if they're not challenging at all, that probably means they're bored, right? They're not engaged for a reason. They don't see the course or the classes as either being relevant or challenging enough for them to engage. So again, a group of students to follow up with, again, primarily for our counselors, to find out, are there different classes you should be taking? Again, is there something happening in the class that's affecting your experience? But for whatever reason, why are you not finding the work challenging enough? And I think it will, as you investigate these individually, it'll reveal all sorts of things, lots of opportunities for counseling and for academic support and other support. Then we asked them, how safe, welcome, and comfortable do you feel in your classes on campus? We did this question in the fall, and it was really low. I think it was like 3% that identified as not safe. Now, this group indicated 5%. So sort of the same problem, right? You could argue statistically, not large, not significant. However, if 5% of your students, right, 1 out of every 20 students is saying they don't feel safe at school or welcomed, again, the question said safe, welcome, or comfortable. So those could be different things. In this particular group, Claudia Pena and our counselors have already followed up, I think, with almost all of them. Again, these are students that are returning next year. These are current freshmen, sophomore, juniors who are returning next year as sophomore, junior, senior. So there's opportunities. In most cases so far, what Ms. Pena was indicating that several of the students said they, one, didn't read the question carefully, weren't taking the survey seriously. However, and then in a couple of cases, they're getting to something that is happening to the students, something, an experience they're having, whether it's off campus or on campus or at home or with friends. And again, it's a great opportunity for counselors and for our health and wellness department to really find out individually why there's some students that that they don't feel safe, welcome, and comfortable. So again, a lot of opportunities to follow up. Then the final two questions, the same ones we asked in the fall, were, how well do you think all of your teachers tried to connect with you personally? And there were three choices. Most of my teachers did a fair or decent job. Most of my teachers did a great job. And then there's a category where they didn't feel like the teachers made an effort. And again, good news overall is a large majority of students feel like their teachers are making an effort. In some cases, an outstanding effort. In some cases, at least a credible effort. And again, in a few cases, there are some students that feel like the teachers, for whatever reason, are not making that effort. So again, opportunities to follow up. These are different students in each of these questions, right? These are not the same students, right? So in some cases, there's crossover, but in most cases, these are different groups of students that are indicating the results on the survey. The last question was everybody but the teachers. So how do you think the staff, so this is administration, security staff, office staff, food service staff, so we're kind of a large swath of people, essentially anyone that's not their classroom teacher. And again, they felt like a large group of people did a pretty good job, and a group did a small group that did a very good job. And then there was a group again, that they have felt like the staff did not make that connection with them. So again, these are students to follow up with. Perception is reality. We don't know until you ask them why they feel like, and I would have certainly attest that I think we have an incredibly friendly staff, right, that does make a concerted effort to connect with students, but there are still small groups of students that are not feeling it yet, right? So here's an opportunity again to start that connection, and maybe that's with their counselor, maybe that's with a teacher, maybe that's with another staff member. One of the conversations that Claudia and counselors will ask a student is that, who are you connecting with? What teacher, what staff member do you feel like has made the best connection with you? And that's kind of a starting point for those conversations. That's an opportunity to maybe get them connected to something new, to make, have them connect with a staff member that they aren't familiar with, another opportunity to get to know their counselor better, and so on. So that is really my principal's report this time. I just wanted to thank and recognize some people, share some of those year-end statistics that was kind of following up from the fall. And I appreciate the time and the opportunity. Thank you.
May I make a comment?
Absolutely.
And Michael, before you go sit down, or you may, if you like, just wanted to really amplify the high quality of this year's graduation and the send-off and the messaging that went out to our students and celebrating them as we should every day. It was just really refreshing. There was a lot of love in the air, and a lot of people walked away feeling really good. So thank you for everything you've done to contribute to that thread.
Ditto. It was a wonderful afternoon.
We'll move on to the People Helping People presentation.
Actually, we're out of order, so I'm going to go
To
to
principals up, or
retiree
retiree recognition, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Or it's both of us.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd also like to thank Michael for spending a year with us, and the graduation ceremony was, I think, one to be remembered. And I want to thank Michael and his team and all the volunteers for that. We're also going to recognize, sorry, I'm hearing the feedback. Is it okay for you in the audience? Can you hear okay? Okay. Well, tonight we're going to recognize over 180 years of service to the district. And this is one of my favorite times of the year. It's sad because we're losing some of our most valued employees, but it's a happy day because we get to wish them the best in their new endeavor and wish them an exciting future. But they've really shown a commitment and been an integral part of the community in supporting our students and staff. So we're going to take an opportunity now to recognize 3 of our retirees who are here with us tonight. And I'm going to ask the board to help with the handing out of the plaques. First off, I'll call up Doug Cota. Is Doug here? Do I see Doug? Did Doug make it? Oh, okay. He probably is, knowing Doug. All right, well, I see the next person here for sure. So Rick Wardrop, why don't you come up to the podium? Probably take Sherry up. And we're going to recognize next Alfonso Gonzalez, who is in this. Yes, he's there. So Alfonso, please come up. And I wouldn't. So we just recognized 38 years and 39 years of service respectively to the district, which is not something you get to do every day. And so we want to wish you all the best and thank you for your years of service and your service to our students and our community. Thank you. Now we can take a short recess.
Now we will take a short recess to congratulate all of the people and refreshments. We have refreshments? All right, we do. Let's get some refreshments and congratulate the people we've recognized tonight.
Do you guys have slides? Okay, I'll have Andrew make sure he cues those.
Actually, that's up there. How does this little thing work? Okay, great. Perfect. I know.
sound system's really loud today, really.
I know.
And I telepathically.
That could.
Did someone sneak in
that
here?
could. Maybe it's the rain. I don't
Oh, there
know.
we go.
Gremlins, right?
Yes.
Yeah, isn't this weird? This weather is just so strange. My daughter-in-law just contacted me. They're having a drought in Pennsylvania. It hasn't rained, and there's wildfires in Canada, and all the haze is coming into Pennsylvania. And she's like, we looked on the news and saw that you guys were having rain, and they're like freaking out.
You know, it's so odd. They spoke about this back in the beginning of the year when I went to this big, I got to interpret for a big conference. I got invited by the owner of Whole Foods and one of the CEOs from Driscoll's wanted me there, and I was one of many. I've never seen so many interpreters in my life in one forum.
Really?
Oh yeah. And they were talking about, they got into talking about weather. They had the national people there, top agricultural. So they said, we're getting prepared, and we've been preparing with this. And they showed us about El Nino. This is El Nino.
Our neighbor was telling us that, and he also told us that 15 years ago when there was the El Nino here, Quail Valley lost power for like 2 weeks. So I told my husband, I said, we're getting a generator. We lose power all the time. I live just right over here in Quail Hall. We lose power all the time. All the time.
Is there, now would that be something to take up like to the state and say solar power? Because now the windmills, just so you know, they're coming. They're here in California all over, the big windmills. Is that
Yeah.
something that would benefit you guys here?
I don't know. We get a lot of wind.
Yeah.
I don't
Big
know.
project.
I think that a lot of it might be our infrastructure.
Yeah. Is that something that you guys have like in the city or county? Or something
Possibly.
you guys benefit from? So if it does go out, you guys have plenty of power.
Look at all the different alternatives, right?
Yes.
Those windmills are loud though.
They are. Solar.
The windmills are loud.
We gotta keep my.
Well, I hate to break up the good times, but we need to move on with the board meeting. And now we can go, you want to go to the People Helping People presentation.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to invite Valerie Kissel up to the podium. She's the Executive Director of People Helping People, and she's going to share what PHP does and how they support us here on campus.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for the introduction. It's a pleasure for me to be here this evening, and I want to thank you for the invitation. I started at PHP about 3 years ago, and there was this little event going on called a pandemic, which really wasn't the best time to start a new job. So it was very difficult to get out and to meet people. But it's really a pleasure tonight to get a chance to talk to you and let you know a little bit about PHP and the services that we provide here on your campus. We have a long history of collaboration with the school district. When I go back through the archives, I see that we've done some life skills, some job development, some job shadowing. But what I want to talk to you tonight about are the services that we're providing here on your campus. And I promise I will not do a death by PowerPoint, but I hope everybody had a chance to see it beforehand and have a chance to look at it. So I wanted to first of all tell you a little bit about PHP. PHP was founded in 1992. So we have been in service for 31 years. We are actually older than the city of Buellton. So we have that claim to fame. And I have our mission statement there and our vision statement. But one of the things that I always say, 31 years ago, whoever formed this organization really nailed it. Because without the community and without people helping to do the work that we do, we wouldn't be able to provide services in this community. So people helping people. It started out by a group of community leaders, some city council, some folks from the school districts, some healthcare professionals that recognize the need in our community for social services. We're kind of out in no man's land in terms of the county. There's North County, there's South County, and then there's Mid County. I refer to us as the tweeners because we kind of get left out of a lot of the things that happen in the county of Santa Barbara. So it was founded, first of all, as an emergency services program, food distribution. There was one employee, a budget of $45,000, and today we've grown to 19 different programs and 24 employees. So PHP still remains the primary provider of social services here in Mid-County, in our Great Valley. Just so you know, our service area is really large. We service all of the way up the State Route 154 to Paradise Road, up past Los Alamos and into Orchid, and down along the Gaviota coast. So that's a very wide range of area that we serve. In our community is a lot of extremes. We have a lot of affluence here in our valleys, but we also have a lot of need. So what I wanted to talk to you about tonight was our mentoring program here at Pirates Cove. And with me tonight, I wanted to introduce Celine Sandoval, who is our program director. I think everybody knows Celine. She's a graduate. Was just sharing some stories about some of her teachers that were here. So I asked Celine simply to let me know what everybody does at Pirates Cove. So she gave me this long laundry list here, which I am not going to read to everybody, but it just shows you that we're working together and our goals are to improve academic performance for all students and improve the social, emotional, and physical development for all students. The Pirates Cove, we have before school nutrition, there's lunch, and after school until 4. And I'm really excited too because I think we have a new home on campus and we're looking forward to that as well. So I wanted to share a couple of the numbers for you of the most current school year. We have served 132 total unduplicated students in the mentoring program. And that represents about 15.5% of your student population receiving the one-on-one mentoring. And just to explain to you how that mentoring works, we receive referrals from teachers and from your wellness center, Claudia Pena. And we have 2 youth specialists here at the Pirates Cove. One is Allison Diaz and the other is Victor Cortez. And they work directly with the students on individual goals that are set up. So there's not a cookie cutter approach. It's all goal centered on what the student wants to achieve in conjunction with what the school's asking for us to work on. I called it Cove Traffic because I didn't know what else to call it. This represents just our check-ins, our drop-ins, if you will, and these are duplicated. So I couldn't tell you if one student came in 40 times, 50 times, but we had a total of 859 check-ins. We're really excited. We had 132 successfully graduate from our program, raising their grades to above a 2.0. So that was a very, very significant achievement. We had 100% graduation. And in years past, I've looked at the numbers and we've had like 88, 92. So this was really a successful year for our mentoring program. We also celebrated 9 2023 graduates. So we were very, very excited about that. The picture you see in the background are some of the students that just received their certification. I think that was life skills, Celine, for life skills. A little bit about PHP and some of the service and how it kind of interacts or interfaces with the Pirates Cove. We have a framework of social and economic determinants of health. And as you read that, you know, it makes a lot of sense because if somebody has economic stability, access to education, healthcare, mental wellness, and have a feeling of a neighborhood environment, and then also feel part of a social and a community. Those are the 5 elements of it. So our Pirates Cove also serves as what we call a family resource center. So what we do is we're able to connect families. We want to improve family stability. And we can do that through a number of our different programs that I mentioned earlier. We have emergency services where we provide food, and we also have housing and homelessness prevention. And we have provided housing supports and homelessness prevention to some of the families here in your school. And we continue to do that. One of the things that's really neat about PHP, and I love the model, it's a model that really works. It's all designed about improving self-sufficiency. So, if someone comes to us and they're in crisis, we immediately take care of what that need is. If they're hungry, if they're unsheltered, we stabilize them. And then we work with them to come up with goals to improve their own life and whatever those goals may be. And typically, one of the things that we're always working on is how to improve their income. Because if you have an improvement in your income, then you have a better chance to thrive if you're not worried about where your food's coming from, where you're going to sleep tonight, that type of thing. And it's really been a fantastic model. And the proof is in the pudding. I've met so many people that have been clients at PHP over the last 31 years. And I'm very proud that 2 of our 18 board members are previous clients of PHP. And I also have 2 staff right now that were previous clients. So what you do, it's not a handout. You've heard it before. It's a hand up. And of course, there are some people that take advantage of it. But for the most part, it's a very, very successful program. So folks, youth that are at the Pirates Cove, if they're experiencing issues at home with perhaps homelessness or food insecurity, our youth specialists are able to work with those families, and we can provide them with access to like mainstream benefits. If they need help to fill out Medi-Cal or CalFresh, or whatever the case may be to improve their family situation. We also have a pantry there where they're like mini pantries where kids can get hygiene items, they can get healthy snacks, and things of that nature. So that's the model that we use, and it's very, very successful. I just talked a little bit about our emergency services, but we do a massive food distribution. I mentioned earlier that was our very first program. We still continue to do that. Monday through Friday, folks can come to our offices and they can take food out of our food pantry. We have an indoor pantry. We also have an outdoor pantry that's operated 24/7 where folks can access food. We have food distribution at the Mission every Thursday. We see about 240 to 250 families there every week. And we also have food distribution in Los Alamos at Creekside Apartments, where we serve about 60 families. We also do food delivery for folks that have transportation issues or if they're homebound. The next area that we work with the school on is mental wellness. And I think everybody's aware that there is a mental wellness crisis throughout the country, here in our community, and it's like something we've never seen before. I mean, the need is so great, and it's like everyone's scrambling, to keep up with it. And clearly the pandemic had a huge impact on it. We're seeing a lot of folks that have anxiety and depression, and also lack of motivation. When you think about, what we went through during COVID and the isolation, it definitely had an impact, especially on the youth and the folks that weren't able to socialize and interact like they normally would, during the school year. So right now, and I did want to point out to you that this is not our complete year. Our year ends in June, but I only have some numbers for you through April. So far this year, we've worked with an average of 17 students per month, and that's up from 14 students last year. We have 33 unduplicated clients that we're serving at the high school and also Refugio. All of our services are provided by associate MFTs, both on and off campus. And the way we have our program set up is we have a fabulous clinical supervisor. She's been practicing for 35 years, and she operates a very, very robust training ground, if you will. We also serve as an educational center where interns come in from Antioch, Pepperdine, Pacific. There's so many schools, Toro, that we work with, where these folks have graduated, but now they need to get their clinical hours. They need their experience. So they work with our clinical supervisor to get their hours. We have services provided here on campus, and we also have a wellness center in Solvang at our service center at Alisal and Maple. I don't know if any of you have seen that, but it's been a wonderful opportunity because there's a lot of stigma around mental wellness. And we have a lot of students and or families that do come to the service center that they want to have the services there and not on campus. And we're able to accommodate that. The other thing too is that we do have telehealth, and there are some of your students that are participating in telehealth. It's just, they're more comfortable that way. We have individual counseling to students, parent-child sessions, individual parent support and family counseling, and we've got about 375 hours of direct clinical supervision. And I think I was able to provide to the board in a packet the consent forms that we use. So how this works is we get a referral from the school, and then our clinical supervisor does an intake and assessment to make sure that it's a good fit for our program. If it's something that's outside of our capacity, we do have agreements with CALM and CADA and Behavioral Wellness, where we're able to, do a soft referral and get these students the help that they need. I asked Rena what we were seeing, and she said it's mostly anxiety, depression, lack of motivation, and low self-esteem. So that's pretty much what we're seeing. The next area that we work with the school is social and community context. One of the things that I've been very, very proud of, Celine and her work, is that we have a group of students, your students, that are called the Cove Champions. And we received a $225,000 grant to do a peer leadership program. So Celine has an application program where we identify these peer leaders. They go through training, and the whole focus of this is responsible living and healthy choices. We look at, it's focused on the misuse of substances like alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, and opioids. And this group, as you'll see in this picture here, they actually got together and they went to City Council, Solvang City Council, to talk about the impact of recreational cannabis, on teens. And it was very, very powerful. And I'm so proud of them. These are our future leaders, and they did a fantastic job. We also participate with the school in Red Ribbon Week. I have trouble saying that. And that's all activities dedicated to promote awareness of alcohol use and the consequences of that. And then also we were participated with the Every 15 Minutes campaign, and that was very powerful. I don't know if everyone has had a chance to see it, but it actually made me cry. It was very, very powerful. And then some of the other areas where we work on is we support the school with some of the activities and events they would like to do. We were participants in the first ever Latino Leadership Conference, which was fantastic. The Cinco de Mayo celebration, Black History Month. And oftentimes we have some resources where we're able to either fund a bus for a field trip or pay for t-shirts and sponsor maybe the lunch or whatever it is. We're always there, and willing to step up and work with the school on those extra things. And we also work with the school to provide additional supports as the situation arises. And what I mean by that, I know in the past, if there's a tragic event or a crisis, we have brought our therapists on campus, to triage and work with students as that happens. And I know we did a lot with COVID where we were able to come in and do some translations and help the school get all the technology out to the families that needed it. We also do support for graduation, clubs and activities. The faculty and the club advisors will often call on us for some ideas or support. Usually it's in the form of, can you fund the bus or something like that. We are very excited to be on campus here for summer school. We'll be working along like we do during the regular school year for mentoring. So we're excited about that. We also do sponsorships for the school, and we do provide scholarships. We had 2 scholarship winners that we were awarded on May 17th. So that is our team. Myself, Celine, Rena, Allison, Victor. Caitlin is one of your counselors here. Nathan Seaford is also a counselor here. John Crowell is our emergency services coordinator. Erica Flores, our development and communications director. Adriana Riaz, our DEI program coordinator. And Kate McLean, our finance director. So once again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to get a chance to talk to you a little bit about PHP, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
If I could just chime in, I wanted to thank Valerie for coming today, and PHP offers a lot of services for our students and provides a lot of critical support that I don't know that we would be able to otherwise on our own. And so I'm really, I'm thankful for that partnership that we have. And she had alluded to a change in location, and I just want to make that public so that I don't get a whole bunch of emails and phone calls. For next year, that's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. For next year, we actually are looking to relocate Pirate Cove closer to the administration building and bring it together with the Health and Wellness Center in the B wing. So we think that'll be a better opportunity for more collaboration and opportunity to have PHP closer to administration and all of our other services for support. So I'm really excited about that. It is a bigger space, and I think that collaboration will just continue to provide services and support for our students.
Thank you, Andrew. And I would like to invite any of you at any time, if you would like to, if you've never toured our facility, please feel free to come down. We'd love to show off our programs and where the magic happens. So thank you very much.
Valerie, thank you. And I wanted to say also, I did have the opportunity to attend the drug awareness assemblies here at the school. I was on campus that day, and they were fabulous. Thought that it was much needed, that kids were engaged. Great job. So thank you.
And I want to thank you for clarifying everything. That's why we didn't have questions. You clarified everything beautifully.
Well, thank you very much. And one other little thing, we're having a small fundraiser on Saturday, the Polo Classic. If you have a chance, please come out. You might have to wear a parka, but we would love to see you. Thank you.
Valerie, one of the things I just want to comment, I've been familiar with PHP for many, many years. And I think part of why the programs work is because of staff and the program, the model is to provide a safe environment where vulnerable people can come forward and get the support that they need. So I know that's worked really well with students in particular here on campus. So thank you for continuing to do that work and being there for the small or large numbers of students as they show up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose.
Okay, so to wrap up my superintendent's report, just a quick update on our locker room modernization program, which I know with everything going on, I wanted to let you know it's still in process. We have our application in to DSA, Department of State Architecture. We did get feedback on it, so our architects are responding to that feedback. We are hoping for approval at the end of this month, which would then allow Diani Construction to go out to bid and be able to bring back the guaranteed maximum price to the board for approval. We're aiming for our August meeting. And then that would mean we would start construction a month or so after that. So we are moving forward. We're kind of at the mercy of DSA, as with all school construction, but that's where we are.
That's the end of the superintendent's report. Thank you, Andrew. So now we'll move on to the board comments time period. Anybody have anything they'd like to?
I'd like to say that back to the graduation, it was beautiful. The best part, oh, you're still here. Thank you, Mr. Niehoff. When the kids were able to so anxiously wanting to move their tassels, and you just held them up and you held them up, and they were so excited. And I loved when each student's name was read and then they walked down the ramp, and the whole crowd, I mean, they cheered for every student. It just was wonderful to see the camaraderie amongst all of these students. And so, great job.
I would concur on that. And also, Jose Juan and myself and Andrew had the opportunity to attend the Refugio High School graduation as well. And to see those faces so excited about graduating high school, what a great program. It put everything in perspective, including the graduation as well, and why we're all here for the kids.
The graduation, I will say, was beautiful. The girls were beautiful. The boys were handsome. Everyone was happy. It was a beautiful day.
Okay, thank you, guys. So it's time for the public comment time period, and I have 3 commenters that actually, I believe, are all aquatics related. So I'll give you the opportunity, if you'd like to take this opportunity to come up and speak now, or unless you want to wait till we get to that agenda item. That would be, how do you guys feel about that? I'd like to wait. You'd like to wait? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, then you got the kids. All right. And Jake, you were at the top of the list, so come on up.
All right, thank you guys for letting me squeeze in here. My name is Jake Kalkowski. I've taught science and coached aquatics at San Ynez High School for the past 18 years. In my tenure at San Ynez, our pool has always been a point of contention in our valley and in our wider community, athletic community. Access for valley residents has been extremely limited over the years, and our own high school athletic program have suffered by having to play in a shallow, deep pool. There have been numerous attempts to upgrade or replace the current pool. In all of those campaigns, there has never been a more advantageous situation than what we have in front of us here. There is support throughout our community to get this project done, and I urge you to not delay this process any further and to approve the proposed MOU between the school district, Aquatics Foundation, City of Buellton, at the next school board meeting. Our community and aquatics programs are in need of an adequate community aquatics complex that will ensure the health and welfare of the San Ynez Valley for years to come. Please, please, please do not let this opportunity pass us by. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jake. So I have Kieran and Lisa. So would you like to go now, or you want to wait till? Okay. Okay, perfect. All right, so we will move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second that motion.
Roll call, please, Terry.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Ibarra.
Aye.
Ms. Grace Velasquez.
Aye.
Ms. Noble.
Aye.
Ms. Shihab.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now we'll move on to our action item.
Actually, probably could have put it up there.
The mission and vision?
Yeah.
So this is for the approval of the new district vision and mission statements.
Yes, so this is a process we started back in, I want to say it was back in October of last year. where, we felt it was time to revisit our mission and vision statement. And I think we had a great opportunity with the new board coming in to continue that and to really get good input. So we brought in a consultant group to help us through this process. We had several meetings with them. We did some revisions, put those out to the community, solicited feedback. And at our last meeting, the board reviewed all of that feedback. And we're bringing those final mission and vision statements to the board now for approval tonight. And with that, the goal is to have the vision and mission statement really reflect the direction and to help us set the course for the district moving forward. So I'm very excited for this, and we are recommending approval of the vision and mission statement after all the work that we put into this point to move us forward. So,
Andrew, if it's not too much, it would be wonderful if you read it out loud so that folks who are on our streaming can hear what is being proposed. Thank you.
I appreciate that suggestion. Here I go. So the vision, San Ynez Valley Union High School District vision. Every student will graduate prepared for success in their future endeavors. The mission. It is the mission of the San Ynez Valley Union High School District to provide a rigorous and broad academic experience that connects and engages the social, emotional, and physical needs of every student in a positive and supportive learning environment.
Thank you, Andrew. Is there any further discussion?
I have one. Can you just explain maybe to the public just the purpose of the vision versus and the mission? The big picture.
Putting me on the spot, I'll do my best. No, that's okay. The vision is really aspirational, and it's something that may not be achievable, but it sets the total direction for the district. And so it's that, it's the destination where we want everybody to get to. And we know it's going to take a lot to do that. And so then the mission talks more about how do we do that? How do we achieve the vision? More of the actions that we're going to have to take to get us to where we want to go. And I think, is that good? Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. Did you have more? Is there a motion to approve the new district vision and mission statements?
I approve.
You make a motion?
And I motion to approve the vision and mission statement.
And a second, please?
I second that.
Roll call, please, Terry.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Ibarra.
Aye.
Ms. Grace Velasquez.
Aye.
Ms. Noble.
Aye.
Ms. Shihab.
Aye.
Motion passes. Yes, please do.
I just really wanted to express gratitude for the thoughtfulness in this process and the number of folks who participated. That was a nice cross-section of our constituents, including students and parents and faculty staff, and members of the previous board as well. And the vision says it. It's student-centered. And I really appreciate the process of our colleagues and all of our conversations about this and how we are aligned in moving things forward with student-centered education at this district. And that makes me feel really proud. So thank you for guiding us, Andrew, as well in the process.
Thank you for that, Jose Juan. So now, actually, we will move on to the discussion items. And we'll start with the Aquatics Foundation Pool Ad Hoc Committee report and MOU discussion.
So I guess the question, I can give some background and then we do have some public comments on this item. So the conversation around the Aquatics Center complex has been happening for a while now. I think several years this has been ongoing. Several years ago, an ad hoc committee was put together with board members and the Aquatics Foundation, City of Buellton, to move this process forward and really talk about how can we address both the district's needs and the community needs for a pool or multiple pools. A year ago, the conversation led to The idea of looking at a privately run project to address some of the issues around building on a school campus. And so the MOU for that was envisioned and developed by district council. And then the ad hoc committee recently met to review the MOU as a group and had a discussion. And so I'd like to turn it over to the ad hoc committee members who were in that conversation to share and report out what that conversation was and where we are. And we also have public comments, and I'm not sure where the best place to have public comments is, but that would be appropriate at this time as well.
Public. So at this time, actually, let's go ahead and hear the public comments. And first up would be Kieran Grainer. There's two of you, so you can choose. It's either Lisa or Kieran. Yeah. Unfortunately, we cannot do that.
So anyway, I'll go ahead and speak now, and certainly if you have any questions as this unfolds, I'm happy to answer them. I'm Lisa Palmer. I am a member of the Aquatics Foundation Board, going on 7 years now. With me tonight are Kieran, who's been active, Gary Thorne, who's a new board member, also a couple of our strategic partners. Dave King, representing the city of Buellton, is here. They've been in this from the get-go. Also Frank Kelsey with Youth Rec, who was instrumental in building the first pool and has been very supportive of helping us to bring aquatics complex that serves both your students or our students, our student population, as well as our broader Valley population, to bring access to aquatics for everyone. I want to resist the urge to do the long play history version of how we came to be here today. But Andrew did touch on a couple things. One is there was an iteration, well, first there was an iteration of the MOU that was actually approved by the district and the city of Buellton and the foundation in 2018. And that was when we were applying for a state grant that required an agreement to be in place in order to move forward. So while we weren't successful in getting that grant, what it did yield is the framework for how the city of Buellton as our programming partner, the district as a facility partner, and the foundation as a economic, a fundraising and also operational partner, how we could work together. Fast forward to today, it was a year ago, I think May, that this board, your previous board, Jose Juan was here, decided that a preferable approach would be the licensing agreement, where the agreement that's before you today would allow the district to give over the parcel to the foundation for the design, fundraising, and construction of the project, and then deed that back or grant it back, whatever the legal term is, back to the district. So that's what's before you today, and that's different than the previous MOU. There would be a subsequent MOU that would address the operation and maintenance ongoing. And I think it's important to remember the foundation isn't here just to put a pool in the ground. The whole idea is to operate it for the benefit of the entire community, right? Give the campus and your students that all deep pool that'll allow CIF competition and a more robust aquatics program. So our students are staying here in our valley rather than going outside the valley for aquatics opportunities. And then also to provide access to basic, learn to swim programs at low or no cost. So from the foundation's perspective, I'm almost done. It's vital that we come to agreement on.
I'm sorry. There might be some questions that we have going forward, but we do have to keep the time
Fair
limit.
enough.
I
All right,
apologize.
you know where to find me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Kieran?
Ready, set. Trust me, Jake only pulls the cord out so long and lets it go. So My name is Karen Grainer. I am the assistant swim and water polo coach. Been here for about 10 years, working with Jake and with the JV coaches. My background is I am a retired fire captain from the city of Culver City, and I worked 40 years as an LA County beach lifeguard. Why I even put that out there is that our pool is going to do a lot. First of all, children, we got to do drown proofing, learn them to swim. We don't have a youth swim program anymore, our youth water polo program. They are feeders into our high school. That's what this pool will operate. If you look at our schedule right now, we run from 2 to 4, from 4 to 6, and then from 6 to 8. And if we add another team in there, which if there's 4, if the girls come up with a JV team, we're going to be going in way into the night. Where if we have a larger pool, we can run 2 practices at the same time, even 3 practices, depending on what we need to do. And that's something that's really important, because right now the JV is getting out of the pool, the JV boys, 8 o'clock at night. Trust me, we don't have morning workout. We let them sleep in because they need it. And it's really a sad situation. And I'm looking at the clock going away. These organizations that we were talking about, though, also the youth programs, not having those, they're feeders to this high school. And those kids have to go to Santa Barbara, or they go to Lone Poke, or they go to Santa Maria. And it's just not fair that they should have to travel. The boys and girls water polo teams, as I talked about, trying to put that together. This season, we have 3 kids that just took lifeguarding, and they're at Dunn School right now lifeguarding. We also have 3 kids that are going to go into the State Lifeguard Academy, and they're going to be lifeguarding down here at the local beaches. And we have 2 that went into the military. They went into the Coast Guard. And they're not going in to go scrub boats and to patrol harbors. They're going in as rescue swimmers. They're going there to save lives. And that's what it's all about. And so I'm trying to say in this situation, as you look at what's happening here, we're drown-proofing kids. We're training kids to go off to save lives. This is what it's in the end result, what it's all about. I also speak for the gray hairs. I don't know how I got elected in that position, but the ability for older adults to use the pool, to get in, we call them, I don't want to call them, they call them the biddies next door, but it's exercise. And when COVID hit, that pool completely shut down next door. And the only pool that could be open was an outdoor pool, and our pool stayed closed. I think that's a crime. We lost a lot of people that wanted to come to this pool outdoors, exercise during COVID, and we couldn't have it open. And yet they went to Lone Poke, they went to Santa Maria, they went to Santa Barbara, and yet weren't we all supposed to hunker down and stay in the same neighborhood? We didn't. We had to branch out because that's the only places we could go ahead and go to. So with that, I say to you that by having this pool, it's not just a high school pool, it's a community pool, but it also takes care of all ages, as we all know. And in the ultimate end goal, we can save lives with the kids that we train. Thank you.
Thank you, Kieran. So now for the ad hoc committee to discuss.
Yeah, well, can I give you just a little more context? I've been on the ad hoc committee the last 3 years since my first year on board. And it's really important that as the board, you know what this means, right? In principle, I think it's wonderful. It's great that, yeah, of course, having a second pool is really excellent. But just so you know, the part of the reason why this hasn't materialized is because there are some real concerning expenses around the operational to the district that go beyond utilities. This is about positions. This is about long-term investment in terms of staffing and what that means in terms of the whole hiring process and the compounded costs. The other piece is that it actually puts the district in a position where they're operating programs that are community-based during the academic day. What does that look like in terms of the school district in maintaining a balance, both to provide the students a safety that they need during school hours and so on. So these were some of the things that were up for consideration. The dollar amounts in terms of operational costs have gone back and forth, but they are not insignificant. One of the things that I do want, and I'm providing you information because I think it's important that you have a wide lens into this, though in the time that I've been here, I know of staff who represent the Parks and Rec in Buellton. I haven't seen a document where the city of Buellton has identified a tangible support for this project. And I think it's really important that if governance, I think it could look a little different if governance were to provide a commitment that came from the city. I don't know exactly what that function is, whether representatives can make decisions moving forward as individuals or program folks in the Parks and Rec. So these are some of the things to consider, right? What's new about this particular MOU, per our discussion, and was a really great meeting, is that the foundation really, because they're more focused on the construction of the pool, this gives them the ability to activate their resources and fundraise more to accomplish the goals to build the pool. With a suggestion, right, or with a plan to have an additional agreement, a different MOU that focuses solely on operational, right? Now, it's on the board to determine whether if there's something actually tangible there, because there hasn't been, again, in the time that I've been a part of this, there hasn't been a commitment from the city of Buellton. And I'm not really sure how the cities work, but I would imagine that with their support, they probably have deeper pockets, might be able to help support the operational piece. That could be interesting. That's about all I wanted to add. And then Kathy, if you have anything else.
Being new to the ad hoc committee at just the one time and reading the MOU, if I'm not mistaken, I think that the foundation includes the youth rec and Buellton, like in as a cohesive group supporting. And the MOU looks to me, what I've read, that it's covering the operational costs. It's having the district not have, that they'll hold all responsibility is what it seems to me for the operational costs, fundraising in the MOU. Is that right? And I was reading it down here, but then moving forward, the programs would be run by Buellton Rec, if I'm not mistaken, for the beyond the school activities, and they would work with the district, is what I'm understanding. And there would be costs and fundraising, and maybe we could ask a question to the foundation members here about that. Oh, we can't. Oh, I thought we. Oh.
So speaking to that, the general question is the MOU on funds for operation. Obviously, the funds are there for the construction and operation going forward, and that MOU that needs to come forward. What does that look like? Who does it involve? And I know I read the same thing that you did, and it involved those three entities. That's great. But what does it truly look like at the end? And then what does it do? How does it fit into the school's general plan? And I think that's a question for you as far as what does the school look like? You know, where we're putting this, how does the parking work? How do there's so many questions around that weren't answered. So.
Yeah, so I can I guess take two parts. So the way the MOU is currently written for this MOU, it does talk about community use so anytime that the district is not using the facility, community use would be managed by the Aquatic Center or the Aquatics Foundation, the city of Buellton, in that partnership, which is how the MOU here is structured. We would need another MOU, which we've worked on previously, which would define what that actually looks like, how that structure works between the city of Buellton, the programming piece of that, as well as looking at what the reimbursement rates would be, or what the offset of the operational costs would be as part of running that program. I think the objective is to run program for the community at lower or no cost or minimal cost to make it accessible. So, there was, I believe, a discussion at some point about maybe setting up an endowment where operational costs could come from that endowment, which is another way to approach it. As far as design goes, I think since I've been here now almost 2 years, we've been through like 3 different iterations of design. And prior to that, there were several others. And what I believe we're talking about now is a design that utilizes, I think it goes all the way back to the original master plan for the campus, which has a 2-pool complex with a pool to the north of the existing pool. But part of this agreement, the way it's structured, is that we would actually be working on that design. The Aquatics Foundation would be developing that design and then bringing it forward to the district for approval. I believe where we are with that is to continue that process where the competition pool would go to the north of the existing pool. And the existing pool, which was put in with community support and funded, in partnership, we just resurfaced the plaster, which is something you have to do every, I think, 6 to 10 years. So that's just recently being redone. What really needs to happen on that pool to make it, I think, last is to resurface the deck and to put in a new deck. And so looking at having a competition pool that is deep and we can do our water polo CIF championships in, have the 33 meters with additional dive capacity in a pool to the north, and then reusing our existing pool, which is, it wasn't built for high school competition, but nobody knew what that looked like back then, I guess, because it's been in there a while and it's served the community it's been great for the community to repurpose it and reuse it and, bring it up to spec to use it as the community pool. That does present some challenges as far as access, because if we're talking community use during the day, we want to make sure we have a way to provide separation from the community and the campus. Part of that design that we'd have to look at is parking. We'd have to look at that security and what that looks like to provide physical separation, and as well as service buildings, so restroom or, office space. But I believe that's all part of that design process that we would go through. Because you have to have the design, it still would have to go through DSA, it would have to be approved, and the design is going to dictate what the cost is. So you need to know that too for fundraising purposes. So this agreement is really, it's that conceptual agreement that says, the board, the district agree to this idea that we're going to essentially license a piece of the district's property so that the foundation can build a pool and then either donate it back, or I'm not what the mechanism is for that, but basically donate that back to the district, and then the district would have the second pool as that community access pool that would be available. Now, we run a pretty robust aquatics program here, so I think we would have a lot of use for both pools, but we would also want to make sure that we're providing access to the community for both pools as well. So when we're not using either pool, just as we do now, it would be accessible to the community as well. I will say COVID, I think, really took a hit on aquatics, and our pool was open for the community last summer, but the challenge was getting lifeguards. And so getting lifeguards service, and usually the YMCA provides that, and they use our pool for summer programming, but they could not get lifeguards last summer. I believe we're hearing that's the same or similar for this summer too. So this is just a plug. Our pool is still out there and accessible for the community. If there's organizations that out there would like to find lifeguards, we could run programming this summer.
We've also reached out to the Built-in Rec and their programs, because a lot of the times they would do one day a week at the pool, but I don't know if their programs will be able to do that this year either.
Yeah, so we're actively trying to reach out to the community for that. But aside from that, this agreement really talks about kind of that conceptually and structurally what it would look like to do that. It's not the final operational agreement. Obviously, there's still some outstanding questions around that. We would have to do further work on that MOU to really drill down into what the details of that would look like. And also, Jose, one to your point, we did have cost estimates put together a year ago. Those are probably outdated by now, just based on the cost of everything. And so, as we go into that discussion, we'd want to look at what the kind of revised costs would be.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that would be really helpful so that we do have a more current look at the numbers. And I think it would be beneficial to have the city of Buellton, give us more of a closer to sure kind of commitment to what it could look like moving forward with operational costs to the district, and of course to be assessed, as well as the youth sports foundation. Is that what it's? Yeah, the youth. Yeah, San Luis Valley Youth Rec. It would be interesting to see to what extent they're able to support an ongoing operations. And yeah, of course, I think it's laid out in the MOU in terms of the community, well, Buellton and the foundation taking on some of the programs, costs, and I think that's great.
And I apologize, I was not at the ad hoc committee meeting when it was going on, but one of the other questions that I think had come up was just amount of time. Like, was there a discussion about, is this a 3-year time that we put in place for the Aquatics Foundation to raise funds, or is it was there an idea that the ad hoc committee felt comfortable with? Okay, because I just noticed that
wasn't part of our discussion. If I'm incorrect, I would yield to and I don't recall that being part of the discussion in terms of time commitment.
But like you said, so this MOU is for conceptual and to allow the foundation to move forward in fundraising and design and that aspect, right?
We would still have to create the license agreement and go through that whole process. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So what type of time frame would this involve you and our employees of the district to speak into this project?
Well, I think the initial phase of design construction, for us to go through, and we'd have to work on an additional MOU for operations. We'd have to engage with our legal counsel on the licensing agreement, which I think, that's probably not a huge impact. Because the way this project is actually structured, project development is pretty much handed off to the foundation. And so, and I appreciate you asking that question. The majority of, I think, the district and staff would be involved in that design kind of approval process, and making sure that when we have that approval, that the design meets, it's going to meet our needs as well, and it's going to fit in the space and do what we want it to do, and address all the issues that we've kind of been talking about here.
And this sounds, in terms of the public using it, they'd have their own locker rooms, and that would be part of this, or would they use our soon-to-be?
Yeah, I don't see a way that we would, during school hours, I don't see how we would practically separate or provide access to locker rooms. So that would have to be part of the design process, is what community facilities would be either built or available or not available during the school day.
And this would be lit at night and involve, neighbors, and they would probably do an impact or some kind of survey with the neighbors with that additional.
That is a good question. I know if it was a district project, we would definitely be doing a CEQA impact study, which looks at what the impact is. I shouldn't say definite on anything, but we would most likely be doing a CEQA impact study. I think because we would still be going through DSA, that would probably still be required, but I'd have to look that up. But obviously, in any construction project that we would be doing on campus, we would want to work with our neighbors and our, the neighborhood to make them aware if there's going to be any impacts to them. CEQA looks at things like, are there going to be increased traffic or lights and those kind of things. So I would assume, and again, I shouldn't assume anything, but I would assume that that would be something that we would do.
So to move forward on something like this, Obviously, there's a need, right? Unfortunately, we have to deal with budgets, right? So that's been one of the main focus is how does this get taken care of going forward? So I think
You can put a public comment, Kurt, if you want.
okay. For me, I'd like to, see all that and how does the whole package come together? How does it work with the master plan? How do we separate the public from the school, from the kids during school hours? Those things to me need to be addressed prior to moving forward with anything. Unless I'm missing something.
Well, I think conceptually, the way the MOU is written, it's written in such a way that if the board agrees to the idea of essentially licensing space and providing the opportunity for the Aquatics Foundation to come in and build the project essentially, with approval, they could move forward and then we would start working on the other things.
On the details.
If, and there's no construction actually happening at that point because we'd still have to do the license agreement. We'd still have to talk through all of that. But it would allow the foundation to move forward with fundraising. It would show the district's commitment to the project. We would still have to work out, kind of all the details to that. And within working out all those details, we would also include all of the concerns and questions that have been raised. And that's kind of why I'd asked about a timeline or something for this particular part of it, because I do see this, and I don't want to get too much into the whole back history of where we've been and how we got here, but this was before we talked about breaking it up this way, we had one MOU that had phases in it. But that MOU got very complex and there was a lot in it. And so we kind of pulled out the first phase and put it into this MOU and being that, conceptual process of what does this look like? All the other stuff was kind of left in that second and third phases of once you have design approval, then you move into the construction phase. And then once you have construction phase, then you move into the operation phase. So I think, Chris, what I'm hearing from you is you'd kind of like to see all of that together, at least as a package.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to move forward with something unless you have the end game on what is this going to look like. To me, you need to have some sort of understanding of, how is this going to really work? Mm-hmm. The concept is wonderful. The foundation, it's amazing what they've done, obviously, up to this point. And I'd hate to see it not go further, but I think there needs to be more concrete stuff laid out. And if we have to approve this MOU for that to move forward, then maybe we do that. I don't know. So it's a question I have because there's some moving parts that aren't just the construction of the pool or the pools.
Can I ask a question? With that said, since this is a conceptual portion, if it got to the point where, so you get the conception, they go out, the foundation gets the design concept, they get board approval and make sure they have, and in the interim, the operational cost then would be more known because as you know, the size and the scope of your project. So you're right, this is terrible.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was the operational costs would then be able to be, I don't see how you can create a solid operational cost when you don't have the concepts. Like, do they want locker rooms? Are there going to be bathrooms? What's the security is so that the school, I think you need the concept first to know that everybody's moving in the right direction. And then you could say, this would be the cost. This is what it would cost for operation. This is what the city of Buellton, the foundation, the youth rec will pick up on their side, what our costs would be on our side. Does that make sense?
I think I understand what you're saying, Kathy. I think we did go down that road before, and Jose Juan can correct me, but that's where we had gotten kind of one agreement with all the different phases, and we had actually, I think, decent cost estimates. They were obviously based on a different design because we hadn't talked about reusing the existing pool at that point, but we had the cost estimates for the existing pool and for the new 2 pools. And that's kind of the numbers that, I had shared with the ad hoc committee previously. I think, looking at the concept of, is this a direction the board is comfortable moving forward with going into agreement with the Aquatics Foundation and the city of Buellton to say, we are going to pursue this project in this fashion. Here's the framework for that first part, which is really the authorization essentially to say, yes, this is a viable project. The foundation can go out and start fundraising and start the design process, and then we get to design. While that's happening, we can then be working on the operational side of it. I don't know that the design itself is going to give us as much input because we've already kind of gone through that, and looking at the design that we're talking about now, I think we can come up with pretty good estimates. So I don't think we have to wait for that to happen. But it does, I think having those checkpoints, which was built into the phased approach, was important because it did give us kind of roadway, waypoints to say, this is how far we are, here's where we should be, and here's the next step and what it looks like. So obviously this item is a discussion item. If there's more information or other questions that we can bring back to potentially the ad hoc committee, or if there's something that isn't in the MOU, or if the board is comfortable with the MOU the way it is now as a conception, to look at coming back at the next meeting. That's kind of where we are for this conversation is, what additional information might you need, or, do you feel like there may be a need for a meeting in between to discuss some of these bigger issues? I know that, Kathy, you haven't seen the whole history of the MOU, and the rest of the board hasn't either. I can share that. It's a lot of reading, but it's probably good information to have. I can certainly share that. And whatever other information might be needed to kind of help with the concept.
Andrew, would you remind me, was there, as part of the design of the additional pool, was there a bathhouse attached to that? Right, because you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so in the 2 pool complex design, there was a building, and then there were a couple different iterations with either a couple different buildings. At one point, I think there was a dedicated office building for flow of traffic for the community pool. So that was addressed originally in the different designs, and obviously in this, whatever the design ends up being, that would have to be taken into account is, the public side, for lack of a better term, facilities that would have to be part of that design.
And would we assume that a bathhouse is a part of the construction of the pool, and that would be something that the foundation would need to cover as part of the construction?
Yeah, so I think the way this design process has to work is the construction of the project has to be done by an entity that is not the district, right? So pretty much all of the construction associated with the project, which to me would include the design of the new pool, the reconfiguring the existing pool to make it a community pool, because we do have to address those issues around access and facilities, would all be part of that project, which would be defined and separate from any district construction project, because that's where we get into public versus private and those requirements.
So, not to beat this up. So basically, we are, we're looking to give for approval or disapproval of moving forward to give them the opportunity to continue to fundraise, and with the memorandum that we would give this property basically to put the pool in. Is that what I'm understanding, without really even knowing what it does to the master plan?
So I want to be careful with words because words are important. So not give license for a use. And I just don't want to put that idea out there. And yes, my understanding of the MOU and the conversations that we've had is this MOU is the agreement that says we agree to the licensing of a portion of the district property for the purposes of developing an aquatic center. This MOU is not that agreement. The license would still have to be worked on. This MOU doesn't talk about the construction process and everything that we'd have to do. It does say, the design has to be approved. We have to go through that, but there are more terms that we would have to discuss along with the operational point of this. So this is, I would say, the first step in saying, yes, let's do this. And then there would be more work, as to Sherry's point, there would be more work with staff to develop it further, and probably more waypoints back with the board on additional MOUs and agreements where the city would come in, I would assume, and talk about the operational commitments and those pieces.
Thank you for that. That helped. So,
and also just to so that this is a discussion. It was meant to help the new board, come up to speed on it. That's why we had the ad hoc committee meeting. The goal would be to, if there's additional information or any questions, to capture those and then come back at the next board meeting with the MOU, potentially as an action item, to then make a decision from as a board to move forward or not. Or, if there's, again, additional information or concerns, there's, again, as I said, I can share that very large MOU, which has more of the operational concepts in it. So I could answer those between now and the next meeting, but that would be the goal, would be to put this on the agenda for the next meeting as a follow-up item.
I appreciated your question in terms of a timeline, right? Will you check in on that with the foundation? Because it would be important for the board to make a decision on how far we wanting to go with this. Is it 2 years, 3 years, 5 years?
And I do apologize. So the reason I asked is when we were working on the phasing MOU, we had talked about how long was a reasonable period of time for that initial fundraising, and then the construction piece and all of those parts. But I think because we pulled it out of that phase structure, we then didn't put it in. And I want to make sure we have reasonable expectations, because I know what's happening with the locker room right now, as far as everybody keeps asking, when are we going to start construction? And there's this whole process that you have to go through to get to the groundbreaking point. So
Because it's different than the locker room, because we're in charge of the locker room, so to speak, and this would be a third party. I know they have to go through DSA, I'm assuming, but would they be able to move faster, though, because it is once they got the licensing or leased out the land?
I don't know about faster, and I only say that because I think when you're dealing with DSA, I don't think anything is fast. DSA that's a requirement for schools, and so even though it's a private project, we are still requiring that to go through that process, because we want to make sure any facility that we have can be used by students after. So, and that's that whole DSA process. I did learn an interesting thing. The DSA, I make fun of, I kid about them a lot, and I probably shouldn't, but they really exist because schools are emergency response centers. And so that's why things cost more to build at schools, is because our facilities have to survive natural disasters, earthquakes, and those kind of things. So when people ask, why is it so expensive to build a school? That's a big reason. We are disaster response centers and shelters and those kind of things. So it does increase cost. It does add time. It's just the nature of our public service in that regard.
So I know there was more public comment, so happy to take the public comment, or we're good? Just need a card, have you fill out a card, so I got. Dave, thank you.
Yeah, hello, hi, I'm Dave King, and most of you probably know I'm the mayor of Buellton, and you have evoked our name many times during this meeting. What really needs to happen to this project, and I've been on this for a couple of years, and many of you remember 7 years ago, this pool showed up from Nebraska, and there was a lot of excitement about putting the school pool in here for Olympic pool so that we could have competition, CIF. My daughter was coached by Casey and John Conley. They won CIF in 2017. That's when the pool showed up. And now we are just kicking it down the road, 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 having meetings, having committees, talking about this, talking about that. What we need, really, the Aquatics Foundation, what they really need is they need a commitment from you people that are elected by the public to give us what we need, and that's that property. Nobody's going to give us any money if you don't say the Aquatics Foundation has acquired this property. I've had people come up to me and say they were willing to make financial commitments to this project, but nobody's going to do it until they know that they can move forward. So if you committee this and committee this and committee this to death, it's going to be another 7 years before we get that pool put in. So sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith and say, we're going to give a commitment to the Aquatics Foundation, and we're going to know that everything is going to work out because they are committed to doing that. It's all these rules, regulations, blah, blah, blah. That's just the minutia of this project. The project needs to move forward in an expeditious manner. So that means giving us the right to the property. We can go out. Lisa is very diligent in doing that, going out and getting people that are willing to commit financial benefit to this project. Chris, no, there is not money at this particular juncture to put that in. That's where this money needs to come from. We need to have people that are committed, and then people that will say, I'm going to give you that money because now I know this is going to go to a worthy project. As far as, you're talking about people and, the random people coming on school and using this pool. I don't know of any school, and trust me, I've been to a lot of them. My daughter was in club water polo as well. Nobody lets students, random people come on to their school grounds and use their facilities while school's in session. That doesn't happen. All that minutia can get worked out as soon as this project and the pool is in the ground and there's water in it and you can get wet. So I'm imploring you, expeditiously move forward and get this going. Commit to giving the property to the Aquatics Foundation, a lease or whatever you want to call it, whatever the attorney legalese you want to put on there, fine. We need a commitment from the ad hoc committee, which I am a member of and have been for 2 or 3 years now, however long it's been. Buellton is committed to this. You've brought that up several times about Buellton. Buellton is committed to this. We just need you to move forward.
Thank you.
Can I say something before Mr. King so passionately, no, go ahead, spoke, or can I speak? Or
Yeah, of course.
what I was thinking before, oh no, you can sit down, sir. I was just, I was going to say, we had a pool put in by the community in the 60s. And I don't know what the long haul, because I don't have all the history of the upkeep and the operational costs. But what I felt from the MOUs and what I've heard from the ad hoc committee, there is a commitment, and that's what I was trying to say before, from the foundation, from Buellton Rec, to give to our community. So before you had spoke, that's what I was thinking as well. I know we don't want our district to be financially burdened with a huge complex. However, I don't think this project would be where it is today without the foundation coming behind it. I don't think it's a frivolous, let's build a pool and they're going to walk away, is what I've gotten from this, and for the years of watching this not happen myself. And so being on the ad hoc committee, my daughters played water polo. I'm a swimmer. I see the importance of a pool in the community, safety for the kids, drownings. Horrible stories I know personally. And that was what I was getting at. That I do feel that there's commitment from the foundation, but to get the money for the foundation, I do feel as a district, we do need to move forward, in my opinion.
Kathy, thank you for that. And part of the reason I brought up all these questions was because I was thinking, hey, this is not a complete package, not understanding the process. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the input from everybody, for sure. So thank you. You know what, I'm sorry. I think yeah, we can talk about it at maybe over coffee or something. Yes. So are any more discussion on this? We're good. So now we'll move on to the 2023-2024 Local Control Accountability Plan. Public hearing.
Where did the clicker go? No? Okay, well, I'm gonna share our annual update for our local control and accountability plan. Just as I'm gonna I'll try to explain all the acronyms I'm about to use. If I forget one, let me know. So the LCAP, Local Control and Accountability Plan, it's part of the local control funding formula, LCFF, that was put into place. Thank you. Yeah, that was put into place. I think it's been almost 7 years now. And it requires that basically every district has to create a 3-year LCAP. There's requirements defined by the California State Board of Education, and we have to do an update every year. These are the priorities that our plan has to address. We also have 2 different types of indicators in our plan. So there's state indicators and local indicators. State indicators come from are displayed on the dashboard, and we pull those in. Generally, those indicators are a year behind because they're looking at what happened last year. Local indicators are things that we've identified to meet the local priorities, and some of that data may be current year, some of it may be previous year. It just depends on which indicator we're looking at and when. Please.
If the indicators are a year or 2 old, and with the last couple of years not being true years, can we disregard them and go back to prior years as a real true baseline?
That's a very good question. So our LCAP was written 2 years ago. So it was the year of COVID. Yeah, the year of COVID. So I would say nobody really knew what was going to happen with education at that time. And so I think this was a best guess. And the data points and our metrics baselined at 2018-19. So they actually baselined the year before COVID because we didn't have good data for the 19-20 year because nobody took the test in the spring of 20. So it was very difficult, and what the state basically said was pick whatever you can to put some kind of data in there. And so when we look at our data, normally, if I was coming to you 5 years ago with an LCAP, you could look from year to year in that metrics update, and you were comparing, I want to say apples to apples, but in some cases not quite, but at least it was consistently the same data set that you were looking at, same place, it was coming from the same place. That is not the case with this LCAP or with these updates. And so when you look at our data, you can see we are trying to compare as best we can, but we also went through last year, and so you're looking at last year's data where it was not a normal year as much as we wanted it to be. We had a lot of kids out for quarantine protocols. It was the first year they brought the test back, really required it for everyone, but they went through a process of reducing the amount of test questions so that the test isn't even the same. So there's just a lot of challenges with the data. Not to say we don't have some data that we looked at and data that we use to kind of say more, as I would say, like a temperature check. How did we do? It's not going to give us trend data over the last several years, though. We will not see trend data. I would call this year maybe our baseline for state testing, because it was a fairly normal year. And you need 3 years of data to show a trend, because you can go, from year one, you can go up or down. And then year two, if you're still going down, then you got an issue. If you're going back up, you don't. So you need 3 years of data to show a trend. But that's a great question. As I said, it's a 3-year plan. So, this plan was written at spring of 21. This year, we're in our second year of the plan. And so next year, we will be doing an annual update for previous year, which would be this year. But we will also be developing a new 3-year plan for the following year. So the annual update, usually we go from December when the dashboard is released and we have our metrics available. We start looking at the data. We do some goal review and revision. We get stakeholder input from lots of different stakeholders. There's a lot of this information in the plan. I'm going to pull some specifics out during this presentation, but the plan's been posted and it's available. We do a county office review, so we work with the county office. They are the LCAP approver, so they have once the board approves it, it goes to the LCAP for final approval. It goes to the county. We also work with our local SELPA, which is our special education consortium, or JPA, and we do any additional updates that they require us to do in the process. And then there's two points in the process for the. We have a public hearing today. And then we'll be bringing it back to the board for approval at the next meeting. General information in the RLCAP, it talks about our 843 students that we served. About 4.1% are English learners, 0.4% are foster or homeless. We have 10.5% in special education. 30.8% are in that socioeconomic disadvantaged subgroup. And then you can see we have 47.2% of our students are white and 46.3% are Hispanic or Latino. Those demographics are shifting, and depending on where you pull the number from, we're actually at the point where we may see a higher percentage of Hispanic or Latino students in the near future. But demographics are changing across the state, obviously. We're starting to see that too. Our LCAP is comprised of 3 goals. I would call these are broad goals. They're general and they cover lots of different possible topics. You can see goal 1 is really focused around all students and their academic success, preparation for college and career. Goal 2 more talks about safety, equity, parent participation. Again, these are requirements built into the LCAP from the state. Goal 3 talks about tiered systems of support, and this really talks about how are we addressing the needs of our students in those identified unduplicated student groups, socioeconomic disadvantaged, English learner, and foster or homeless youth. So unduplicated, thank you. Again, that is another term that we use a lot. Unduplicated means that, so we have students and they may be in multiple subgroups. So you may have a student who is an English learner and they also may be socioeconomic disadvantaged. The LCAP, because again, this is funding and based on funding formula, will only count that student once as far as being in a group that receives additional funding. So it's a way for the state to say, we recognize you have students who have additional needs, but we're not going to give you $1 because they're an English learner and then another $1 because they're a socioeconomic disadvantaged student. We're only going to give you $1 to meet all of the needs of that student, essentially.
And just to be clear, we're basic aid, so it doesn't matter to us anyway?
Correct. So that's a good point, Chris. So we do not actually receive additional funds based on our unduplicated students because our property taxes exceed what the state minimum would be. So we don't see those additional concentration or supplemental dollars for our unduplicated students the way many of our neighbors in LCFF districts do. However, we still have to write an LCAP and discuss how we're providing services to our students as if we were receiving those additional dollars. So part of the LCAP update every year is we have to reflect on what are identified needs. And identified needs are actually called out in the template, and they're specific as far as we have to look at the dashboard indicators. So one of the areas we have to look at is our very low indicators. So anything on the dashboard that's identified as very low. For us, it was our English learner progress. And we're talking about a small number of students. So the difference between 2 or 3 students making progress or not making progress can throw us into that very low category. 2 or more levels below means that any student group that is below the all student group by 2 or more levels on the dashboard. So the dashboard has very low to very high, I believe. So if our all group is high, then 2 levels below, would go medium and then low. So anything in low or below, we have to identify as an area of need. I hope I explained that okay. So for us, that means our socioeconomic disadvantaged students perform low on the ELA, English Language Arts CASP, compared to our all student group. Again, our grad rate for our socioeconomic disadvantaged students was medium, which was 2 or more below our all students. So when we look at dashboard indicators, it's really telling us we need to look at service and support for our socioeconomic disadvantaged students and our English learners. So then we also look at all the feedback, the local indicators, areas identified by our stakeholder groups, and that's where we get the other lists of things that are in our LCAP. So we're not just looking at the dashboard indicators, and we're not just focused on our English learner progress and our socioeconomic disadvantaged students. We're looking at things like parent participation across all of our students, particularly our subgroups. Sorry, my throat's going to get scratchy. Feedback from teachers and parents around student engagement, student apathy, probably as a result of COVID. Mental health and wellness, that's a big one in surveys and some of the other information that we gather. And also looking at the need based on PHP numbers. Sorry. And then academic supports. Math, interestingly, wasn't identified specifically by our dashboard, but math is also an area where we know we have to do some work based on the scores. And then looking at, the feedback from our students on the Healthy Kids survey about addressing bullying and concerns around student safety and other areas. So all of that goes into the update process. Yeah, so there's a section on the LCAP that actually lists all of the different surveys and meetings and where we gather information specific. Some of it's specific to LCAP, some of it's information we pull because it relates. So it's all of those interactions that we've had. So here I've highlighted some of the metrics. When you look at our CASP performance, going back to baseline, we're actually slightly higher. Oh, sorry. We ended up slightly higher overall in math and ELA compared to our baseline, which was 18-19. So pre-pandemic, we're slightly up from pre-pandemic levels. I thought it was interesting too. I will point out that in high school for the CASP, it's given to 11th grade only. There is no, it's not tied to grades. It's not really tied to any outcome for them, for students. And so if they're going to, try, it's because they're doing it either, out of a desire to do well, a desire to do well for their teacher, a desire to do well for their school. But there really isn't an incentive. So it's easy to just click through if you want to do that. Yeah, they may be in a, so it is just something to keep in mind. There are ways to kind of address that. The other interesting thing I thought was, one of our local indicators is we look at our pass rates, right? C or better in classes, in certain classes. last year, again, we're looking at last year's data, our pass rates were a little bit higher. C or better. Now that could be related to coming back from COVID, and grades aren't necessarily uniform. So that there could be some of that going on. But also you can see our CTE pathway completion rate was down. So we had less kids finishing a CTE pathway coming back from COVID than we did prior to. And that may be, could be a couple of different factors, but that just means that career technical education pathway, it means that students haven't gone through the required courses that they need to finish that pathway. It could mean that students were taking different classes and maybe trying different things, or it could just mean that because we had that reduced requirement for graduation because of COVID, students may have taken less electives and not completed pathways. So there's a couple of different reasons why that may have happened. And then A through G completion rates. A through G completion is an indicator that shows if a student has met all the requirements to transfer into a UC or a CSU. That was slightly up as well from the baseline, 18-19. We didn't have that indicator for a bit too. So again, it's not a great comparison. We'll have to see where we end up with that moving forward. Okay, so based on that, what happens? We go through. Let me. Did I put that? Yeah. Okay. I was just making sure I got the right slide up there. So we looked at that, and then we made some decisions around some of our actions. Again, remember, these actions were originally created 2 years ago, before we fully came back from the pandemic, not really knowing what this was going to look like. And so we did go in and we modified some of those actions that we're talking about here. And I've only listed, you can see in goal 1, we have 13 actions. And I've only listed here on this slide 6. Sorry, I think I'm getting that. I'll power through it. Thank you. So these are the 6 actions that we've modified for the upcoming year. ERWC was an English course that the English department had explored the last couple of years. And we've shifted now to a dual enrollment English college course so that students who take this will be eligible for college credit in English. So that's one of the changes. There was an original goal to provide the PSAT at all grade levels for all students, to basically require all students to take it. Last year, that was not implemented and discussed because the colleges were talking about not taking the SATs and weren't sure what that was going to look like, so we put it on hold. So for next year, we're going to continue with 10th grade taking PSAT, which is the traditional indicator or the traditional path. And all students who want to take the SAT in 11th grade would have access to take the SAT in 11th grade. And we still need to revisit this because one of the other things that we're looking at is looking at having to work with departments on benchmark evaluations. So we used, and this is the other couple actions there, we used STAR Renaissance last year. STAR was showing proficiency at much higher levels than CASP did, so it was not a good predictor of CASP. So then the question is, what are we doing it? What are we using it for? So my goal for next year is to have the new principal and the new administrator in counseling to work with the department chairs on really identifying meaningful benchmarks or metrics that we can use. Personally, I'm a big fan of pre and post assessment, because you can show growth. Well, that's the other challenge is, yeah, CASP doesn't really give us a broad picture across the grade levels. So that's what 1.7, 1.8 are. And then 13, really shifting from the ILT model where we had some teachers doing some after school work to looking at having a couple release periods potentially 1 or 2 release periods during the day where a teacher could get some release time and go work with teachers in the classroom during the school day. Okay, goal 2 metrics. Our per pupil to counselor ratio is pretty much consistent. The goal is 300 to 1, and we're at 284 to 1. So one of the measures that we look at is how are we doing with connecting with parents, and so 99% of our parents are registered and contactable, which means they haven't clicked the little button that says don't send me any notifications. So that's a pretty high percentage, and that means that when we send out a parent square, unless it's going to spam or they're just not reading it, then they are getting it. And we want to see that number be as high as we can. We did take the Healthy Kids Survey this year. We had 183 ninth graders take it. We also had 11th graders take it, but I didn't pull 11th grade stats. It's in the LCAP. You can read the breakdown there. The challenge with this was the way they were put in the benchmark year in the LCAP. I don't know if the Healthy Kids Survey questions were different, but they didn't line up to this year's survey. So I had a hard time finding comparables, but I tried to do my best to find the comparable that made the most sense or matched the most. And it looked like the options were a little different as far as, the responses being very safe, neither safe nor unsafe, or unsafe, very safe. The language seemed a little different. So I pulled safety because I know that's something that we've talked about, and it is a big part of the LCAP goal too. And if you combine very safe and safe, you get 98% in ninth grade, neither safe nor unsafe. If you combine very safe and safe with neither safe nor unsafe to me means you don't have an opinion on it, which means you probably don't feel unsafe. That's 98%. Those two groups together, and then very unsafe 3%, which actually oddly aligns with the survey that NEOF just put out to students. And when we say 3% of 183 kids, 18, 9, it's like 7 students, right? So that's a manageable number for us, certainly, to be able to reach out. Now, this is anonymous, so we don't have that opportunity. But with the survey, that we can do through the principal, the ability to reach out to kids and ask them, are you really, what's really going on, I think is very powerful. So then, are you happy with the school? Obviously, I'd like to see that be 100%, but we all went through high school, and we all know that, high school is, for some, not their favorite place to be. So we can always work on improving that. And then parent survey, I think my timing of this survey when I put it out, so we do, since I've been here, I've been doing this parent survey to get parent responses. We only had 60 responses this year compared to 98 last year, so not great numbers. Part of it, I think, is timing. Part of it, I think, is I think we had put out like 3 or 4 different surveys at the same time because I had, this one kind of went out between the mission vision surveys in between. So I think there was just a lot of surveying going on. But, it does give us some numbers to look at when we say, 70%. So if I do 85% or either agree, strongly agree, or neutral on, is my child respected by the, by the teachers and staff? Encouraged, to be an active partner in schools education. Do parents feel that they are? 60% agree, strongly disagree. 20% didn't have an opinion one way or the other. 18% disagreed. Reading the comments, I can see, obviously, to fill out a survey, you've got to feel like you have something to say, generally speaking, that you want to share. So I do think the timing of this too, when it went out, was essentially between January and March was the timing of this, so that we had a lot going on campus. And I think we had parents who, did feel strongly about what was going on, and they did respond and share. So we can always improve, the work we're doing and how we're engaging with parents. So one of the things that we really took away, because we do have parent engagement in the action, so there wasn't really a huge need to go and change those. But a couple of things was the security aspect of it. We did get some feedback around our camera coverage and where those are going. So we are actually in the process. We got a grant, so we have 10 new cameras going in. So that'll increase our coverage for next year. Over summer, we're doing that. And then one of the comments and some of the feedback we got around this program called Link Crew, which is supposed to really bring freshmen in and do freshman orientation, but a really challenging time getting freshmen to sign up for that this year. And we also are looking at opportunities for how we can really build cohesive leadership on campus. This is something Niehoff had kind of talked about and been working on. So our goal is to integrate that Link Crew program into the larger ASB leadership class, so that ASB now isn't just about the folks who are elected, but it's more leadership opportunities for kids. So bringing the freshmen in, bringing more freshmen into that leadership concept and part of ASB, and still having them do those freshman orientation activities and do some of that leadership work as freshmen, and get them integrated into that whole program, is what we're going to look at doing for next year. This year we did a hybrid where we paired Link Crew period and ASB period so they could work together. We still had two different teachers doing that. So the next step next year is to really integrate the two as one. So goal 3, metrics. So here's a big one, and I put it up there because it was what it was. Our chronic absenteeism went way up, over 24%, 24.8%. This was last year, and this was when the county implemented the quarantine protocols. So if you remember, originally people had to stay home for 10 days, and then over the period of the year, it went to 7, I believe, and then 5, and now we're finally back to there aren't any. But that was a big, so chronic absenteeism, just to define it, is 10% of the school year, which is 18 days. So if you were out for 10 for a quarantine, that's more than half of your 18 days right there. And then if you were sick or you had a trip or you were out for whatever, couple sicknesses on top of that, you're chronically absent. Yeah, so everybody, all districts have seen their chronic absenteeism number go up from for last year. Number of students served in Tier 2 and Tier 3. So this is those additional services. So for example, students who are referred to services that PHP offers, they may be in counseling or receiving mentorship. Tier 3 is kind of the next level above that, where we may be doing the special ed referral or assessment. Those numbers went up. I don't think that was unexpected given the realities of COVID. And we did increase services last year with an additional day of mental health therapist for general ed students, which I think helped take the overload from PHP. And we did that this year as well, and we plan to continue that for next year. Again, the passing rates, remember goal 3 is looking at our subgroups of students. So we actually look at the passing rates of our English learners. I pulled them specifically, but also in the metrics or our other subgroups. Their grades were up too, as far as passing at a C or better. And so I do think that was some of that kind of return from COVID effect with the grading. So I'll be curious to see what those numbers look like for this current year. And then our English learner language proficiency. So that number was up slightly. Just again, it's 1 or 2 students, but our overall indicator went down. And I'll have to go look why, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I'll have to go look at why that is. And so that number is still, 34.6%, 26 of our English learners. That number should be something that we're focusing on as well. And that's where we've modified action 3.3 to So previously, the bilingual aid support that we were providing wasn't provided as part of the LCAP. It was actually something that was addressed in one of our COVID response plans. That funding has gone away. That plan is no longer in effect. So I've brought the bilingual aid support into the LCAP, and we plan to continue that for next year. So this person goes in and works directly with our English learners in their content classes as support, and they essentially co-teaches with the teacher and provides that direct support. So next steps, we'll be bringing back the LCAP on the 20th for approval, and then I'll submit it to the county office. So with that, we need to hold a public hearing on the LCAP, and I'm also happy to answer any questions the board might have.
I have one question. In that one group of number one, you had like 13 or whatever goals. Are we gonna reduce some of the goals so we can really focus?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So next year, as we go through developing our new 3-year LCAP, a couple of things will happen. The state's going to release a new template. So I don't know what that format will look like yet. There has been talk that the state may require more specificity in the LCAP, which actually may lead to more actions rather than less. For us as a basic aid district, with, I would say, small percentages, part of that is, for things like providing bilingual assistance in a classroom for our English learners, that's a very specific action. We have to essentially show increased and improved services at a certain percentage. And our challenge is, because we're not getting those additional dollars in, we're already allocated dollars to programs, is how do we show that we are actually providing services that we feel do meet the needs of our unduplicated students. And for us, generally, that is, we have to look for places where we can do something for everyone that also will help. So it will help all students, but also help our unduplicated students. So things like improving our first instruction in the classroom, so professional development for teachers. And that professional development could include many different things, but also looking at how are we providing, that support for example, providing the PSAT for all students in 10th grade. We know that if we didn't provide the PSAT for all students, some students would go out and take it on their own, right? And they would find a way to do that. So looking at how we can, in our LCAP, really address the needs of our unduplicated students in the context of how are we supporting all students as well. For basic aid districts, it is a challenge, and there is a balance that we need to look at as far as, because we're not getting dedicated dollars that we are spending on specifically our unduplicated students the way an LCFF district would. Like a neighbor district may get an extra $2 million that they're getting in to support their unduplicated students, and they then direct those dollars directly to support services for unduplicated students. We don't have the additional dollars coming in. But we still have to look for how we're going to support our unduplicated students and help them make progress when we know that they do need additional support. But I do think we do have opportunities to say, how can we provide support that helps improve the experience for everyone. So that's what we'll be doing when we look at our new 3-year plan. I do expect that with the new template, they're going to also include our students with disabilities in there more prominently and more specifically, where we will probably need to address how we're supporting our special ed program. And that process, I'm hoping they release the template sooner rather than later. In the past, they have not. But once we get that and we know what we're looking at and what we have to really focus in on, that'll help drive what the goals and the actions will end up looking like. I do expect it will look different from what we currently have. But I also want to make sure that anything that we recognize and identify as working is something we can carry forward as well. So, yeah, it'll be a process for us as we go through that.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So what I'm hearing you say is that some of the efforts, as you allocate resources with an eye to benefiting all of the students, right? When you've already identified a population that actually needs more targeted support. Why wouldn't that be the case then? Have efforts that are more targeted towards that particular group that we're trying to, to bring forward, both through teacher professional development or even more contact time with the students that need additional support. What's the practice?
No, and that's exactly what we do look at and what we do. So when we look at, I'll give you an example. Like if we were to, provide additional periods of, for example, guided study, or it's not really called study hall, but tutorial, where students who are struggling can get additional support and have that additional time. So that's where that 7th period is going to come in next year, is providing students. And while we may not specifically be targeting unduplicated students because it's open to all students who may be struggling, we also know that, we are going to reach students who are struggling and are also unduplicated, right? A more specific targeting, and looking at how we can provide specific support would be in, the bilingual aid position is a prime example, but also in looking at, I'm thinking about how we're offering the mentor, academic mentor students, and looking at specifically putting them in the classes where they can provide that additional support based on the students' needs in those classes. So not just assigning them randomly, but being thoughtful about where they go to provide that peer support. So I do think there's different ways that we can look at providing that additional access. The other thing is the tutoring opportunity after school and providing that for students. I guess, so, if you look at another district who may be getting a lot of LCFF dollars, they may do things like bring on, additional staff, like additional teachers on special assignment who are focused on reading or literacy intervention, intervention teachers. Because, so much of our budget is personnel already, and because we don't get those additional extra dollars on top, doing those kinds of things, are really challenging for us. So we do have to look for ways, I would say, to be maybe a little more creative in how we do direct services and supports, including additional time. One of the other things, when you look at how we structure our freshman classes and trying to have potentially lower class sizes across our freshman classes so that students, when they come in, have more, teachers have more opportunity to support students in our freshman classes. Again, not essentially directly targeted at our unduplicated students, but knowing that teachers would have more time with all students to provide that additional support. So there's different ways we can look at that to make sure that we are supporting the students who need that additional help and support. And then when we go outside of the academics and making sure that students can access the academics, we look at those tiered levels of support that we're providing, particularly through our partnership with PHP and some of the other mental health services that we provide. Our socioeconomic unduplicated students, making sure that they have access to additional services that may support, whatever their needs are outside of the classroom, so that they can then access class. Because if you're coming to school hungry, you're not thinking about learning, right? And so we want to make sure that our students have that full support. So it's a multi-layered approach. Just ask that we open the public hearing and um, for the LCAP.
So it's open to public comment, public hearing on the LCAP.
And so anybody who wishes to come up.
Yeah, anybody that wishes to come up and speak on it or questions?
Not questions, just.
Oh, speak on the LCAP, yes. I'm sorry? You know what, Frank, at this point, we've moved on from that. I apologize. So now we can move on to, public hearing closed at 8 o'clock. Now we'll move on to the original 2023-2024 original adopted budget.
Okay, welcome guys. Thanks for hanging in there. I know budget is not the most exciting thing to end your night, so I apologize. I will try to keep it brief and upbeat. Okay, so we are talking about the 23-24 original adopted budget, and I just want to remind everyone what to look at and what to review for the budget reporting period. So I want to start out, oops, I forgot that it's not controlling from my computer. So I just want to start out by pointing out the budget website. So the district business office has a site, and then there's a page specifically for budget information where we post all the state forms and the analysis of changes and all those things. So if you ever need to find it quickly, the budget office website is available. To go through the reminder of the documents that you want to take a look at for each budget iteration, you want to look at the SACS reporting documents. Those are the documents that we send to the state that encompass the entire budget for all the funds. That is sort of the really in-depth view, and sometimes it's hard to digest, and it's just not very user or reader friendly. So we create the analysis of changes, and the analysis of changes is sort of the 30,000-foot view of Fund 01, which is the fund that you approve budgets in, and that's our general operating fund. And it looks at the major moving changes from the last adopted budget. So whether that's first interim to second interim to unaudited actuals, and vice versa. So there will always be an analysis of changes document to show you what the major moving parts are. You'll also have the excess reserves reporting forms. That is just a state requirement that the district separately report out any funds that we carry in Fund 01 that are in excess of the state required minimum. And as a reminder for us, the state required minimum is 4%. So any funds that we carry in our general fund above the 4%, we have to report out separately. You'll see that in a later agenda item tonight. And then, of course, the presentation to the board that we make tonight. Okay, so talking about important notes and changes for the 23-24 fiscal year, we want to talk about the fact that the original budget is the hardest budget to project because there are so many moving and unsettled components going into the educated guesses for the original budget. So we're using projected ending fund balances from 22-23 as our projected beginning fund balances for 23-24, and we won't know actual ending balance numbers, thus actual beginning balance numbers, until sometime in the end of August, beginning of September. We also don't have the governor's budget numbers. They aren't released until well after our deadlines district-wide for our number finalization. So just a note that the governor's May revision, which came out and doesn't affect our LCFF revenue, but does affect several of our large one-time grants, was not finalized until May 12th, 2023. And this was well after when we had to have numbers done, documents done, sent to the county for review and posted for your all review. So for this reason, changes to the budget caused by the May revise are not reflected. We will, however, talk about steps that the district took to mitigate the impact of these changes, as we had warnings from school services, CASBO, and other state organizations that these types of changes might be coming. And when we talk about changes to the budget, we talk in terms of changes to the 23-24 fiscal year budget as compared to the 22-23 fiscal year budget, not changes from any projections in multi-year assumptions from prior budget periods. So what this means is that in 22-23, we already knew, based on the CBA, for example, that our classified salaries were going up 3% in 23-24. So in our multi-year projections, we already had that 3% included when we talked about salaries for classified employees. However, when I talk to you about the budget for 23-24, I'm going to tell you that there is a change to the budget for the 3% for classified salaries. That is because when I talk to you about changes, I have to talk in relation to actually approved budgets. The multi-year projections are not approved budgets. So when I'm telling you that there are changes, I am comparing it to the last budget iteration. So it doesn't mean that the multi-year projections that we brought before you are changing dramatically. It's just in comparison to the 22-23 fiscal year, there are changes, and these are what those changes are. So looking at the changes for the 23-24 fiscal year, we removed one-time revenues and expenditures. So, as we get these grant funds, we have projects and programs and staffing that are associated with them. We pay them with one-time funds. Those that can fall off that are temporary or one-time, we remove both the revenue streams that are not going to be recurring, as well as the expenditures that we chose to spend with those. Any general fund expenditures that were moved into the restricted resources to be paid with one-time funds that are ongoing or continuing have been moved back into the general fund as the one-time funds are depleted, unless there are still one-time funds to use in the multi-year. We have reduced 2 FTEs, so 2 full-time equivalents, which is 2 staff members in the classified arena, 1 in maintenance and 1 in custodial as a result of retirements that didn't need to be refilled. The savings from attrition for rehires of retirees is included. So when we talked about our retirement incentive, we had senior members of our staff, both certificated and classified, that were at the top of their salary schedule all the way over and down, and they say make $100,000 a year. When they retire, we refill that position, and we're refilling that position with someone with less seniority, less years of service. They come into the district at, say, 60 or 70,000. So that savings is what we call savings from attrition, and that has been included in the budget for 23-24. Again, talking about the changes, classified salaries are increased 3% as a result of the last year of the collective bargaining agreement that we currently have in place. No certificated salary increases are included as a result of the CPA. Classified health and welfare will increase 1.5%, and certificated health and welfare is increased 2%. We also included the costs of a school resource deputy. This was previously a position that was funded through a grant, and it was no cost to the district. So now that grant has been expended, it is now going to be a cost to the district. That cost has been added. We have also added 1 full-time equivalent or 1 staff member as a campus supervisor on the classified side of the house.
May I ask a question at this time?
You may.
So in terms of adding now the resource deputy to the district, is that something that the board will approve at some point?
Yes. So there's 2 aspects to that. The board will approve the budget, whether they want to have that budget in there, but they will also approve the contract that will come before the board once all the negotiations have happened with the sheriff's department. So as of right now, if you approve the budget, you're approving the ability of the district to enter into, contract for services up to this amount. However, that would not happen until the district has brought forth the contract and you guys have all had the discussion. Do you like the contract? Do you want to move forward with this? It's in the budget so that you have that opportunity, and it gives you the flexibility to move forward in that direction, knowing what the numbers already are. If you get to the point when the contract comes before you and you make alternative decisions or arrangements, that's totally fine. Andrew, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just also want to point out that it is an action that was included in the LCAP. In prior years, because it was grant funded, there was no cost associated with it, but it is still an action in the LCAP as well, and the LCAP does reflect the budget item for that as well.
For the new LCAP? Or
So,
when does that end in terms of it being?
so that LCAP goes one more year.
One
So
more.
that, so we're only budgeting that resource deputy for the 23-24 school year in the budget and in the LCAP. It's only reflected for one additional year.
Okay. And then this would come before the school board in terms of the budget for approval when?
So it'll be you'll approve the original budget if you don't want any edits made to what we present tonight on June 20th. And if you do want edits, we would include those edits and bring them before you June 20th either way. So you would approve the original budget June 20th. And then any further contracts, MOUs, discussions would happen at a later date.
And I think it goes along what you're asking. So the approval of the agreement with the sheriff's department would be brought to the board as an MOU to enter into a contract with the sheriff's department for services for next year. So our current contract with them actually expires June 30. So we don't have a contract with them. Approving the budget is separate from approving the contract. We could approve a budget without it, and then the board could approve an MOU with it, and we would just reflect that budget change in the first interim or whatever the next budget report is. It's really the agreement with the sheriff's department that puts that into place, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because I would want us to have a conversation about that as a discussion on that specifically, especially $950,000.
And so my intention is to get to a point with the sheriff's department where we have an MOU with the costs that we can bring forward to the board, and then have that discussion. We put a placeholder in the budget. We don't have the actual numbers from the sheriff's department yet. But rather than bring that back as a change at first interim, my intention is to include it in the budget and then have that discussion with the board as an agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so when we talk budget iterations, we always talk assumptions. What are your assumptions? What are the building blocks of your budget? So for basic aids, there aren't a lot of assumptions that do go into the budget creation. We know with original budget, we're using estimated beginning fund balances. We remove one-time expenditures. We know all that. We know the effect of our collective bargaining agreement on next year's budget because we had a multi-year agreement. The major moving parts for us in our budget are things like property tax increase. That's really the one biggest impact to our budget in our projections. And we're keeping our projections at 2.5% to be conservative in light of the economic trends and forecasts that we're seeing with the governor's May revise. We think that that's even more pertinent right now to keep it at 2.5. Let's see. Like I said, we know negotiations are settled for this year. There's no swing in costs for there. We do know that we have continued declining enrollment, but again, as a basic aid district, that really doesn't negatively affect us with the exception of a couple of smaller, like 20 grand, 30 grand for lottery funds and those types of things that are based on ADA or average daily attendance of the students that are enrolled in our school. So for us, declining enrollment isn't super negative in a fiscal impact type of conversation. There are other impacts to having declining enrollment that may not be positive, but fiscally, it's not something that's hurting us. We also have the assumption that we're going to keep and maintain the $3 million static minimum fund balance, and that we have in our budget, we want to point out, we did not include the reductions from the governor's May revise to our art, music, and instructional materials block grant and the learning recovery block grant. So in our budget and in our multi-year projections, we have the full amount that we were originally allocated because, like I said, the May revise didn't come out until after these numbers were finalized. However, we took steps to mitigate the impact of these because we had a feeling these reductions were going to be in place. So we chose expenditures and budgeted expenditures that we can very easily not spend and therefore not impact our budget negatively. So
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, so the governor's proposed, and I don't think this has ever happened before, to take money back that he's already given to schools. And so that's the governor's proposal. The legislature still has to weigh in. So it's not certain that all of these dollars will not materialize. That we won't know that for another month or so. as Alicia said, as we started to hear that this might be in the works, we did, I think, strategically push some of those funds out into the multi-year. So if the funds don't materialize, then we won't do those things that those funds have been allocated for in the budget moving forward. And this is one of those where we're kind of in uncharted territory because, again, we've never seen a governor say, I'm going to take back money we've already given to you. And it sounds like the legislature may not be in agreement with that. And so we will have a much better idea when they actually decide to pass all the budget trailer bills, which we probably won't know till mid-July, what that will actually look like. But we don't anticipate it will affect our original adopted budget for next year, but it could affect the multi-year and what we do in the out years.
Another point of contention or thing to note is that we have not included the revenue coming from the Prop 28 Art and Music Fund because they have still not yet allocated it or apportioned it to districts. So to be on the conservative side, I don't want to add revenue into our budget that, yes, we know it's coming, but also we knew the one-time grants are coming. So this is law. So that's the difference between Prop 28 and the one-time grant funds. Prop 28 is in law. They have to provide these funds, but I'm just hesitant given the current climate and the economic forecast. I want to see the apportionment, see the allocation, and then we'll put it in. And that will most likely come with the first interim budget. We do have guesstimates put out by like school services and estimates that are probably pretty reasonable, but just to be on the safe side, given the circumstances, we're leaving that out until we actually have numbers and dates of apportionment.
It's a bit conservative, but so some districts are actually hiring people for these positions now. But in addition to not getting the exact amount yet, they haven't released the rules for how the money should be spent. And so the one thing, there's this whole discussion around supplant versus supplement and whether the funds are going to be able to pay for existing things or will have to go to new things. Until we know that question, I'm not comfortable allocating the dollars because that makes a huge difference, especially for us when we're looking at our budget situation. So.
Okay, so moving into the actual numbers in the budget, I thought it might be helpful instead of just looking at the numbers and telling you what they are to kind of explain how they compare to prior budget. So our LCFF revenue increased overall by about $343,000 as a result of our 2.5% projected increase. So all things considered, we assume or expect to receive an additional $343,000 next year. Our federal revenue decreased about $38,000 as a result of the removal of the one-time dollars. State revenue decreased by $1,100 as a result of removal of one-time dollars, and our local revenue decreased $108,000 as a result of the removal of one-time grant money in the amount of $55,000 for auto, $10,000 in grant donations for graduation, and other one-time restricted revenues not being continued. So what you see here is the comparison in each revenue source between the last budget iteration and this one so that it gives you kind of a comparison of how we're moving forward. Are there any questions on the revenue changes or impacts to that?
State and federal, was that one-time monies? That's the
Yes.
decrease.
Yeah, it's the decrease for, the
COVID funds.
Yeah, the COVID funds and we only got the arts and music and the learning recovery for 2 years anyway, so they gave us the money already, so it's not continuing. So
Okay,
those are the types of things that were taken out.
thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on revenue? Okay, so we'll move on to expenditures, and we kind of set up expenditures in the same way as a comparison. Certificated salaries decreased overall by $42,885 as a result of the savings of attrition. So those that retired were rehired at a lower rate, like we discussed earlier. Classified salaries decreased by $13,246 despite increases in unrestricted expenditures of $54,000 as a result of not backfilling one custodian and one maintenance worker after their retirement. Benefits increased only $851 as a result of the reduction in classified staff and the savings resulting from attrition and new hires. So the benefits include everything, not just health and welfare, but like workers' comp, unemployment, all those things. You know, CalPERS, CalSTRS, all those things are wrapped up into the benefits coding. Materials and supplies increased $162,334. $1,800 of this increase was unrestricted, while $160,484 of this was in the restricted side due to the purposeful spend down of the remaining one-time revenues that we have. And again, in here, there are expenditures that are associated with the arts and music that we don't have to do. They are set up in such a way to be strategic so that if they come back and take more than they're expecting, we are in a position where it isn't hurting people or programs that are already, you know, in the works. Services and operating expenditures, which includes things like water, electricity, gas, trash, sewer, etc., increased $76,000 overall, with a $182,000 increase in unrestricted and $106,000 decrease in restricted as a result of removing that one-time restricted expenditures, and the addition of the school resource deputy on the unrestricted side for the increase of $150,000. Capital outlay decreased a little, and the only thing budgeted here is the what we went out for the RFP for IT infrastructure equipment associated with the IT cabling job happening over the summer. So the capital outlay this year was 80 grand. Next year we are looking at 79,217, and it is just that one cabling project that has already been approved by the board. There's nothing else in capital outlay. Lastly, we have what is the listed on here as Salinas Valley Special Education Consortium, but if you're looking in any of the state or SACS documents, it's other outgo, but I've labeled it this way because for us, it is inclusive of our Special Education Consortium costs, and this is the only thing budgeted here in this line, and it was an increase of $241,000 in line with the consortium's second interim MYP, which I very sadly and hesitantly don't want to tell you, but I do have to tell you, we just got an email, I think last Friday it was, that the increase has very much exceeded the second interim projections for the consortium, so much so that it's significant, and we're looking into it before we...
Before we bring you the really
Yes.
bad news, there's a meeting scheduled that we're going to sit down and talk to the consortium about.
We need to understand where, like, are they being extra conservative? What's going on here before we bring it to you, because it kind of made our heads explode. So we don't want to do the same to you if it's not realistic. So we're just going to meet with them first and see where that number came from. And if it is true and, you know, a reasonable projection, we'll bring it to you and explain, you know, why it got that way or how it got that way.
I would think the trend in special education costs is increasing. That's the trend. And so we really do want to understand where the consortium's coming from on that. I do also want to point out that another thing that we are budgeting for next year is an increase in legal costs. We've had just an unprecedented amount of costs associated with complaints and investigations and Public Records Act requests. You know, especially this last half of the school year, and a lot of staff time has had to been utilized. And when we don't have staff time, for example, you know, Terry does our PRA request, and when she has to prepare for the board meetings, we have to hand that off to someone, and the only people we have available is, you know, law clerks and legal counsel. So those costs this year have been just, I would say, 2 to 2.5 times more, 3 times more, I think, than we budgeted in the past. Next year, we're not quite budgeting that much, but we are budgeting more than we have in the past, just in anticipation. We still have some things that we have to wrap up, and, you know, we have several complaints coming from a couple different individuals, and I don't know that that's going to stop. So we are, I would say, being conservative in anticipating future costs associated with that.
And we're doing our best internally to mitigate those costs. Like Andrew said, we are using our, you know, staff, our local staff as much as possible, but there's only so many of us. So we are trying to be diligent and not just randomly hand them things because we don't want to do it. So, I mean, we don't want to do any of them, but.
To the consortium, do the costs go up because they're ADA or based versus R?
That's a very good question. The consortium structure is interesting because it's it's both basic aid and LCFF districts all together. The consortium actually does claim the ADA for our students, so they get revenue that we can't get because they're claiming the ADA. So that's actually a good thing. I think there's a couple things driving costs, and again, I haven't had an opportunity to dive into it yet. But so the administrative unit of the consortium is Buellton, and they just negotiated and settled. I believe they settled. Anyway, I won't say what because I don't know if they've settled or not. But I believe they've just negotiated their contracted raises for their bargaining units for next year. So that part of that increase from that to the next, I think, is included in that. And because special ed staffing has been really challenging, I do think they did some incentives on the special ed side that may have increased that a bit more than they were anticipating. The other thing is in mediated settlement costs. I think there's some anticipated, costs associated with responding to COVID that is there. And then just in general, I think staffing, because staffing has been such a challenge, going out to non-public agencies for staffing increased costs. So I'm not 100% sure what's driving the cost from the number that we got in second interim to for next year, but I do think those all probably play a factor. And we are actually engaged with the consortium in a cost study with an outside independent financial person who's actually taking a look at all these things. And so I will have more information to report back in a few months, probably August, September.
Are there any other questions about expenditures? Okay. So we'll move on to talking about the fund balance. So I broke up the fund balance to talk about it in 3 different ways: the unrestricted, the restricted, and the combined. When we're talking about future planning and where are we, what is the district's position, really the only fund balance that matters is the unrestricted fund balance, because restricted is just that. It's restricted for whatever it is required to be used for. So it is not something that we could fix a deficit with or, give raises, all these things. Restricted is specifically, it has its rules and it's in its little box. And when you're looking at the combined fund balance, you're looking at the fund balance with the restricted dollars in there. So it skews what you're looking at. So for us, looking at our unrestricted general fund balance, we have our projected beginning fund balance of 4.5, and then our deficit, which is projected to be around $1 million, and our ending fund balance leaving us at a projected $3.5 million. And this is important because we're getting into the territory of having to discuss whether or not we maintain our $3 million board required minimum fund reserve. And if we do, that ultimately leads us to a place of making some tough decisions. And if we don't, then what do we do with it? How do we protect the district from times of fluctuation and economic uncertainty? And our $3 million reserve leaves us with excess reserves of a little over $563,000. So we're really, cutting it close to our ending fund balance when you look at just the unrestricted side of the house. So it's taken several years for this to come to fruition, but it is something that we have seen on the horizon for the last 3 to 5 years. So looking at the restricted general fund balance, when you're looking at restricted, you expect to see a deficit, especially in the position of what we've seen with all the one-time COVIDs and the one-time grants. You get the revenue into your budget one time, and then you spend it over several years. And then each year that you are spending down funds that they are not replenishing is a deficit, which is required and good and healthy and what we intend and mean and need to do with restricted funds, because most of the time with your restricted funds, if you do not use them, they eventually go back to the state or the federal government. So it is wise to use them, and seeing a deficit here should not make you nervous because it is intentional. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, any questions on unrestricted or restricted general fund balance? Okay. So then we'll move on to the combined general fund balance. And this is helpful just to see where we are. But again, it has the restricted fund balance. It also has the restricted deficit, which really aren't telling the story of where the district is ending at the end of the fiscal year. So it's important information to know. It's good to know, but it is not indicative of the district's financial position. Okay, so with that, we will move on to our multi-year projections. And with the multi-year projections, there are a few more assumptions that need to be included. And we use best practices and things like California CPI, Consumer Price Index, and all of these different CalPERS rates, CalSTRS rates, interest rates, all these things that are put out there for districts that are requirements for us to use as funding fiscal factors and assumption factors in the out years. So as you can see, School Services of California puts out planning factors for districts to use with each budget iteration, and they let us know, what are the required statutory benefit amounts, what are the mandated block grants, what do we think we're getting for lottery, all of those types of things. So these are the types of assumptions we use as a basic aid because we're not really looking at enrollment. We're not looking at ADA forecasting and projections. We're not looking so much at our unduplicated because we don't get supplemental. We don't get concentration. Our LCFF funding is property taxes, not base grants. So for us, these are the majority of the assumptions that we use when we're looking at our multi-year projections. For our SPED increase, again, we used second interim numbers, and that was a 4% increase for 24-25 and a 3.5% increase in 25-26. At this point, I am not sure if that is accurate any longer, given the current projections we received Friday. We also have our in lieu payments to Olive Grove Charter School continued through 25-26. And that is a result of legislation that was passed that allowed charter schools to have an additional year of authorization on their original application or original authorization term. So Olive Grove Charter School payments are continued through 25-26. Okay, so looking at our multi-year projected unrestricted ending fund balance and deficit, this does not include any of our restricted dollars and it is not combined, so this is indicative of the district's financial position. Right now, just remember that we are using projected beginning fund balances. We won't have actuals until, September-ish, but if everything is as it looks right now, we're not sitting great in that is a typo, in 24-25 and 25-26 with regard to our minimum fund balance. Now, a lot of districts would be like, hey, you have a, $3,400,000 left over, you're doing great. And yes, that is a good financial position to be in. Yes, it is higher than the 4% state minimum fund reserve, but we cannot sustain the level of deficit spending that we have been for the last 5 to 7 years. So it is unsustainable at this point. And if we continue to do so, not only will we eat through our $3 million reserve, but we will eat down to the state minimum and below. And at that point, it's not something any of us want to be associated with in name, for that type of thing. So looking at the out year projections, we noticed that our minimum fund balance is not intact as of the 24-25 fiscal year. So we need to look at our projections and have a discussion about minimum fund balance and what we want that to look like. And we were looking at School Services of California's minimum fund balance average reserve levels based on the latest statewide data, which is from 21-22. Unified school districts in 2021 were 22.3, and in 21-22 were 22.19, and high school districts in 2021 were 21%, and in 21-22 were 21.2%. So the average is in the mid 20s. So it is not unheard of to have a reserve level that we have and to maintain that reserve level. And the statewide average is not only looking at basic aids, it's including all districts, including LCFF districts. So it's important to note that basic aids tend to have less insulation from economic impacts, whether good or bad. So we need to be more mindful of our minimum fund balance and carry a greater reserve so that in the event that something happens with our property tax revenue, we are prepared to, weather that storm. So we need to be mindful of that moving forward. Are there any questions with the multi-year projected balances and deficit? Okay. So then looking at future discussion items, we want to keep in mind that the in lieu property taxes to Olive Grove Charter may fall off after 25-26, which would be an approximate increase in our revenue of $151,500. When I say may, it's because we don't know what the legislation is going to do with charter schools and reauthorization and what that's going to look like and how much authority we'll have in the reauthorization or not of the charter school. So tentatively, it could be an increase in revenue of about $151,500. Also, our debt services payment for our municipal lease ends in 26-27, and that's an approximate reduction in expenditures or increase in revenue of about $280,000. So I guess not an increase in revenue, but a reduction in expenditures is more applicable of a term. And then again, our $3 million reserve, do we keep it? And if we keep it, what domino effect does that have on the decisions that we need to make moving forward? And lastly, one-time monies will be depleted, and any expenditures that are still covered by those monies must either be eliminated or moved back into the general fund. So we do have some expenditures that are being kept alive with one-time dollars, and if we continue to keep those alive after, they'll move back into the general fund, and thus they will, affect the numbers that we just looked at tonight. Okay, so our next steps in September, we will come back to you with our unaudited actuals budget report, and we will begin our planning discussions for the 24-25 original budget. In December 2023, we will bring back our first interim budget report as well as the interim independent audit report. The fiscal year independent audit report. And then in March 2023, we'll bring forward our second interim budget, and we will continue planning for the 24-25 original budget. Are there, excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Are there any questions? Okay. Tried to keep it short and sweet. If you have any questions, you know where to find me.
So we'll open public hearing.
Hi, hey, my name's Andrew Oman, and I just had a question because I saw in the budget there is the proposal to reduce a custodian and a maintenance worker. And so, there's only two ways to do that. If they're doing the same amount of work, right? If their school hasn't shrunk, then the only way you can do that is to either try to squeeze more work out of the people who are doing the work now, or not do some work. And I didn't hear that addressed. And I know you can't answer questions during the hearing, I don't think, but I would at least ask you to think about that question, because either you're just going to try to squeeze the people who are working for you now, or you're going to not do some things.
Thank you. Any more public comment? We'll close the public comment period. Do I give a time? At 8:37. Thank you. And yes, let's take a 5-minute break. You guys good with that? I could use it. Okay.
So there's not going to be Denver and area? So it'll be Denver. Okay. Thank you, guys. You guys have a good one. We can take these, cupcakes, right?
Okay, we'll go back in session and move on to the 2023-2024 proposed EPA budget public hearing.
Okay, that's me again. This one is slightly less complicated. Each year, as part of our LCFF funds, we get what's called Education Protection Account, and we are projecting to receive $169,102 for that EPA. There are restrictions on how EPA dollars can be spent, and each year we are required to hold a public hearing and just report out what our budget is, what we expect to spend our EPA dollars on. As we have for the last 5 to 10 years, we are spending our EPA dollars on guidance counselor salaries. So that's it. Salaries and benefits, excuse me. Yes, the guidance counselor. So we just take a portion of the guidance counselor salaries and pay them from EPA, the ones that we currently have, to help, address budget.
So I'll open up for public hearing. And we will close it at 8:45. And now we'll move on to the excess reserves for 23-24 through 24-25 public hearing.
Okay, and this is the part about the budget where I said that we have to report out our excess reserves above and beyond the state required minimum reserve. So for us, we have more than that in every budget year. So we have to fill out the minimum reserve requirements forms and just report out that we are using our excess reserves for our $3 million board resolution mandated minimum fund balance, and anything over that is being reserved for deficit spending.
Actually, I have a question on that.
Yes, sir.
So the $3 million was, how long has that been in play? How long has that been part of policy?
So it originally, so the 3 million has been in place for, I would say, 4 to 5 years now. Prior to that, it started at 30% minimum fund balance, and the board at that time did not like that 30% was not a static number. So with each budget iteration, 30% of the budget changed, and therefore their minimum fund balance changed with each budget iteration, their required reserve, So they thought that it would be easier for people to digest a static number. So there were 2 years of that 30% before they moved to the 3 million. Maybe only 1 year, actually. Take it back. I think it was 1 year at 30%, and then they moved to the 3 million.
Okay, thank you for that. And then, so that puts us currently around mid-20s percentage-wise.
Yes.
With the inflationary environment that we have going on, should that number be discussed? Maybe not right now. And I know we're looking at deficit spending already, but let's face reality, costs are going to go up. And so the fund actually should go up in my mind.
So I would strongly suggest that as part of our bigger conversation, when we look in September and we start our 24-25 budget planning, we review minimum fund balances and whether we want to keep it at 3 million, increase it, reduce it, change it to a percentage. But I think that talking about it independently is not as helpful as talking about it in terms of the overall discussion and planning for moving forward, because anything that you do with that minimum fund balance, let's say you decide that you want to make the minimum fund balance $10,000 or $10 million. That means that I cannot, and Andrew cannot, absent board action, bring you any budget model that falls below that $10 million reserve. What that also means is that it's backing decision makers into a corner in terms of reductions of programs and those types of things. So it's very important when you talk about minimum fund balance that you do so in a way that is strategic and balancing the needs of maintaining a good reserve, healthy reserve, but not backing all of the decision makers into a corner. So it's part of the bigger discussion, and I think it is wide.
Great answer. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I had a thought just on that. With the inflationary number, though, our taxes have gone up as well. So really it kind of offsets that to a certain extent because our tax revenue is higher than inflation, or maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kathy. I think the other thing we have to remember when we think property tax is its assessed value. So until property is sold, we don't necessarily see that increase. And also with the new law, with the 55, and you can take your tax exemption with you, I don't think we really have a good idea of what that impact will be to that revenue, because that's how we see, when property changes over and the new value is assessed at the higher value, that's how our property taxes go up beyond the 1.1% or whatever the annual is. So, but that's why, as Alicia said, I think it is important to have that conversation around the minimum reserve in the larger context of when we get firmer numbers, especially in September, we will have because we'll have end of year actuals, right? So we'll actually know how we did this year. And as we start getting into looking at what revenue projections actually are, I think that will help the board in that conversation. Obviously, any conversation about where the board's comfort level is with a percentage, as we just heard, statewide average 20-ish, mid 20%, but basic aids generally have a higher average because of unforeseen circumstances, and we don't necessarily have that state buffer. So, yeah, I do think that's going to be a really important conversation to have as we get into the budget cycle for next year.
So did we?
Open for public hearing on that public comment. And we will close that at 8:51. And now we'll move on to board matters. Any discussion on upcoming meeting dates? I think we solved some issues last time.
Yeah, can I just note that we did change the October meeting to the 24th?
Yes.
So that is.
We did that.
Yes, we did. And now I guess we'll move on. Is there any more discussion on that? Okay, let's move on to closed session.
Before you guys escape, I have the secretary sign some things.